Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Michael drove up to the house in a white foreign car, parked the car near the driveway, and to a whistling tune, hurried to his parents' house. The 25-year-old man was in high spirits. He was going to propose to a girl he liked today. He had been going to a cafe where Adriana worked as a waitress for several weeks and tried to get her favor. However, the girl behaved in a detached manner towards him. She did not repel the guy, but she did not let him near her either. Michael patiently waited for Adriana to deign to respond to his proposal to meet with consent. And that day came, and they had been dating for more than a month. The guy rang the doorbell and waited impatiently for his mom to open the door. Michael knew that his father was still at work, so he chose the moment when he was not home to talk to his mother. Soon the door created Betty, and seeing her son on the threshold, exclaimed, "Why didn't you warn her that you were coming over? And do you even have your own keys to open the door? You have to make your mother get up to open the front door. I wanted to disturb you so that you could get away from the TV and meet me on the doorstep." Michael replied with a smile and kissed his mother on the cheek. Betty gently stroked her son's head and then followed into the living room. The young man followed his mother and, without waiting for the landlady to sit down, spoke to his mother. "I come to you with news, but good news. You probably remember that I told you about a girl I like very much. Anyway, she and I started talking, and I think I'm in love, although I'm not making any sense right now. I've fallen in love with a girl, and I don't think I have. I remember you used to walk around with an urn all the time. What are you trying to tell me? I want to ask her to marry me. It's time for me to start a family, and it's time for you to have grandchildren too," the young man said with a smile. "Oh yeah, you've only known this girl for a couple of months, and you're already in a hurry to put a collar around her neck. You are sure of your feelings. Son, I'm sure of it. You have no idea what a nice girl she is," the son said enthusiastically. "Don't answer so hotly at once. You'd better tell me about your anger. Who is she? Who are the parents? I understand that you started this conversation to inform me about the future acquaintance with your fiancé. How smart are you?" "And you've got it right," Michael said with a smile, and then began to tell his mother about his beloved. Betty learned from her son's narration that the girl is 22 years old and works as a waitress in a small cafe. She is from the village. She rents a room with a friend. The girl's name is Adriana, and she has never been married before. Michael's mom didn't have enough information. She started asking about Adriana's parents, who they are, and what they do. However, the son grumbled at these questions and asked why such meticulous details about the life of the chosen one. Betty wanted to answer the tycoon, but immediately changed her mind, as she realized that the boy would not give any intelligible answers. He just didn't know them. The old woman then asked her son when the acquaintance with the girl would take place, and here the young man smiled and said that it would be tonight. Betty splashed her hands. She didn't expect it to be this day. Michael, seeing his mother's reaction, laughed and then hugged her and asked her not to worry. The older woman threatened her son playfully with her fist and mouthed, "This is not the way to do it. You should have told me about it in advance. I would have at least prepared a festive dinner in honor of it. Now I'll have to order something from the restaurant. Mom, you don't have to set the table. We'll just have tea and cake tonight. It'll be easier that way. I told you Adriana comes from a simple family, and she's not much for formal occasions. Okay, you got it. I guess I'll just have to tell my father myself," Betty said, smiling. "You're right on the money, as always," the boy replied, and then kissed his mom and immediately left the apartment. After a while, Michael and his girlfriend were sitting in the living room at his parents' house. The young man watched his mother asking tactfully questions to the guests. Adriana answered the landlady without any embarrassment. Soon their conversation was interrupted by the boy's father, Benjamin. The man from his wife already knew a little about the election of Michael, but nevertheless, like his wife, wanted to know everything about the girl. After all, The son is going to marry Adriana, so he approached her. Are you a waitress? Are you really going to run with a tray in a hall all your life, waiting for tips? Michael involuntarily wrinkled his nose at his father's question. He understood perfectly well that his father did not like where Adriana worked. The young man looked at the election to see her reaction. The girl, however, calmly answered Benjamin that the place of work suited her quite well, and she did not consider it shameful to take a tip when people themselves offered it of their own free will. As soon as Adriana's reply sounded, the landlord glanced at his wife, who was looking thoughtfully at her guest. The elderly woman felt her husband's gaze and turned to him. She understood perfectly well that the girl did not like the answer, and only Betty wanted to say something as Michael spoke. Dear parents, now is not the most important thing where Adriana works, because I can assure you that only we will legalize the relationship with her. Then my wife will stay at home. And I can assure you that our wedding will happen in the very near future, as I am going to ask for Adriana's hand and heart today. And after this phrase, the guy turned to the girl and softly said, you are ready to become my wife and live the whole life together with me. Adriana was not embarrassed at this question. It was as if she knew that today Michael would propose to her. The girl was silent and did not hurry to answer. And the young man waited impatiently for his chosen one to speak. A few minutes passed, and Michael could not stand it, and again made a proposal. And only then Adriana, smiling, said that she was ready to become a spouse. The guy sighed with relief and tenderly kissed his chosen one on the cheek, and then cheerfully told his parents to prepare for the wedding. As soon as the son with his future daughter-in-law left, then Betty softly said to her husband that she did not particularly like Adriana. Her husband looked at her husband with surprise and asked, "What, this girl did not please you? You see, she acts like a queen." Michael said that Adriana is from the village, and village girls behave modestly and are embarrassed when they first meet a guy's parents. I didn't see any embarrassment here. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my personal opinion. Honey, do you know better? I'm just confused by Adriana's answer about the profession. You know, it would be embarrassing in front of our friends and acquaintances. If Michael's wife works as a waitress, you realize that our family is quite well off. You and I are entrepreneurs, and our son too. So you see where I'm going with this. However, Michael said that after the wedding Adriana will not work there. But you need to talk to your son about it. I'll be sure to talk to him. And I will also try to meet with this girl alone before they apply to the registry office, thoughtfully said her spouse. Betty called her son after a couple of days after this conversation with her husband and asked about Adriana's job at the cafe. Michael was surprised by his mother's question and asked her why she would do that. The interlocutor replied that she just wanted to talk to the girl. The boy dictated the mother's address. Betty met Adriana at a cafe and returned home after the conversation. In a dejected mood that did not escape her spouse, the husband sympathetically asked his wife what had happened. Blagoviova replied that she drove to her son's girlfriend at work and caught her at the same table with a friend Michael. Benjamin responded with a surprised expression. But it's not a crime. It might be. But the fact is that the son's buddy was holding Adriana's hand, and then, as she noticed me, she abruptly removed her hand and became very embarrassed. In my opinion, it was not a friendly handshake. And then Ethan, seeing me, said hello and left in a hurry, which is not like him at all. You know, he's always friendly with us. But okay, that's not the point. Next, I tried to talk to Adriana about her feelings for our son. She said that she loves Michael and added that she doesn't like strangers prying into her soul. You realize Adriana called me a stranger, and I'm her future in-laws. I mean mother-in-law. How do you like that, Benjamin? After his wife said that, he frowned. He did not like what he heard. The man nervously rubbed his nose and asked his wife if she was going to tell Michael about it. The woman nodded in response and picked up her phone, dialing her son's number. She wanted to communicate with him immediately. Michael answered. Betty, without preamble, asked him to come over to their house in the evening. The boy agreed and was soon at his parents' house. As soon as he entered the apartment, he turned to his mother. "I know why you called me. Adriana called me and told me everything. She said you're prejudiced against her, and I'd like to know why. Although I can answer that for you. You both don't like that she's a waitress." "What do you mean, prejudiced?" the mother said, perplexed, and looked at her husband, who was looking at her son with a frown. And then Betty, seeing that her husband is not in a hurry to enter into conversation, said, "I just wanted to talk to your chosen one, and I did not say anything bad even. Adriana, by the way, sat with your friend Ethan at the cafe where she works and held hands with him nicely. I think that's exactly what she didn't tell you. What are you trying to say?" "Ethan knows that Adriana is my fiancée, and they get along great, and it's not like he stopped by her place of work. Mom, just say you're not happy with my girlfriend just because she's not from a wealthy family. It's more honest," the son said softly. Betty looked sadly at her son and said quietly that she wanted to see him happy in the future. She was worried that Adriana was marrying for money and not for love. Michael looked reproachfully at his mother and asked her not to talk about it again. And as soon as he said, his father immediately turned to him. "I promise you that Mom will not talk about it again, but you must also give me your word that Adriana will quit her job. And when are you going to apply?" Adriana happily agreed to stay home after the wedding. "We're going to the registry office. We'll be celebrating in a couple days. Whatever my fiancé wants, since I promised her that." Time flew by, and soon there was a lavish wedding with a lot of people. The newlyweds were given a lot of gifts and money, and the couple, after celebrating the big day, soon went on a wedding trip abroad. Returning from the trip, Michael asked his wife what she was going to do. After all, from the cafe quit before the wedding. Adriana replied that she would sit at home, since she did not want to work at the moment. Her husband happily agreed. He himself mentally dreamed that his wife did not work, but was a housewife who faithfully waits for her husband after a day's work. A couple of months passed as the weddings thundered on. Michael was working and Adriana was living a life of pleasure. She attended fitness workouts to spas. The young woman liked the fact that her husband was ready to fulfill her every whim, which she invariably took advantage of. The only thing that Adriana did not like was the frequent visits of her mother-in-law, who often hinted that Adriana was spending money. And so the girl once appealed to her husband to talk to her mother so that she did not come to us so often. "As soon as I see Betty, I get mopey. She'll give me a stern look. I feel like I'm doing something wrong. And I often hear her tell me I'm wasting my money. Oh, sweetheart, it's Mom. How can I stop her from coming over? I don't think you see my mother that way. She's trying to help you and me. I'll talk to her about the money." Adriana nodded contentedly in response, but didn't say anything. Michael called Betty after the conversation with his wife, and embarrassed, asked her to come over less often. He then added that she should stop rebuking Adriana with finances. This request from her son was a shock to the mother, and the woman involuntarily thought that Michael could only say such words under the influence of Adriana. Betty decided to speak frankly with her daughter-in-law in private. The woman chose the right moment and came to visit. Adriana saw her mother-in-law on the doorstep and pressed her lips together. Michael's mother noticed it and softly spoke. "I don't understand you at all. Why you are turning Michael against me. You know very well that if I tell you about spending too much, it's the truth. You are still quite a young woman, and you could have gone to a higher institution to get a profession. You've completed 11 grades, and you're not even thinking about a major. I understand that you are going to live off your husband and not work. I don't understand you. Your son is happy with me. What more do you want? Michael, I don't mind staying home and not working. And about money, I don't think you should look into our wallet. My husband and I don't meddle with you. You're wrong. And I can tell you why. You probably forgot that we give you a penny every month, and not a bad one. So I have a right to talk about money," Betty replied calmly. "Okay, I hear you, but I'm going to tell my husband about this conversation. And if you have a conflict, don't accuse me of it later, the daughter-in-law said. Betty did not continue the conversation and silently left. At home, the woman told her husband about the visit to her daughter-in-law. Benjamin was unpleasantly surprised by the behavior of his daughter-in-law and only wanted to tell about it. As they heard the sound of the door opening from the hallway, Michael entered the living room. The parents immediately noticed the frown on their son's face. Betty guessed. The boy's visit was related to today's conversation with her daughter-in-law, and the landlady turned out to be right. As the young man said in a rather rude manner, "I promised you that Adriana would not work. So why don't you, father, keep your word?" Today my mother was at Adriana's place and rebuked her for being a victim. When I came home, I saw my spouse with tearful eyes. Don't talk to your parents like that. Don't forget that your family is still financially dependent on us. And if the mother made a remark to Adriana, it was done on the merits, the head of the family said in response. Excellent. Now you have reproached me for using your money. Then don't give me any more money. We'll live on our own somehow. Michael said sharply and left the apartment at the same moment. Betty hoped that her son had said that in his heart and would call first in a couple of days. But that didn't happen. The woman was genuinely worried about the rift with Michael. She offered her spouse to be the first to go to reconciliation, but her husband said that it was not worth it. 10 days flew by, and Michael still did not call his parents. Neither did the daughter-in-law. The woman knew that the son is currently on a business trip and therefore decided that it was necessary to first establish relations with the main. Betty got ready and drove to Adriana's house. Her door was opened by her sister-in-law, who unceremoniously said that her mother-in-law's visit was undesirable at the moment. The guests tactfully asked her to invite her into the apartment, but the daughter-in-law refused. Betty was about to leave, as noticed on the rack in the hallway another man's jacket. The woman looked at it and asked Michael at work, "Who's your guest?" "No one in his absence. What kind of silly speculation is that?" Betty only at that moment noticed that Adriana was wearing a hastily thrown silk robe, so she pushed her sister-in-law aside with her hand and entered the apartment. She hadn't even made it to the living room before she heard a man's voice say, "Adriana, honey, are you taking so long to pay for sushi?" Betty immediately recognized the voice of her son's friend. It was Ethan's. The woman walked briskly into the living room and saw Michael's buddy lying on the couch with his bare torso. Ethan turned at the sound of footsteps entering and looked embarrassed. Betty, barely holding back from shouting, muttered, "How are you both not embarrassed?" "Ethan, Michael is your friend. He's helped you out so many times with free money, and you betrayed him. Have you no shame?" Then the guests turned to her daughter-in-law and said, "And how could you afford it? From the wedding was only a few months, and you are already tumbling with another man. Why did you marry Michael then? Was it just so you could be wealthy?" At this time, Ethan stood up and pulled on a t-shirt. The man then approached Betty and asked her to calm down. The woman gave the guy a resounding slap in return. The young man rubbed his cheek and said, "I understand your outrage. But the thing is, I love Adriana, and she loves me. Yes, Michael is my friend, and I was going to tell him about our relationship in the near future. It's just that your son and I started courting Adriana together. She made her choice in favor of Michael. But after a while, she realized she didn't love him. You can't blame her for that. Let me tell you myself, Michael, he's a good man and a good friend. He should understand everything." Betty listened to Ethan in silence. The woman didn't know what to say at the moment, for she was overwhelmed with feelings, disgusted with the couple. The guests looked disdainfully at the couple and spoke to Ethan with disgust. "Get out of here, and don't come back here until your son gets here. And remember, you have to tell me everything. Michael the day he arrives, and if you don't, I'll tell him myself." After that, the woman turned to her daughter-in-law and spoke, "And you too must confess everything to your husband. I hope that you have not completely lost your conscience and try to tell your husband truthfully how you gave him horns. A few days passed. Betty waited anxiously for her son's return. And the day came. Michael showed up at his parents' house the next day. The mother looked carefully at her son, trying to see if he knew about everything. The young man saw that his mother was worried about him, and he quietly said not to worry. Then he added that he already knew about Ethan's relationship with Adriana. Betty anxiously asked him what he was going to do. Michael replied that Ethan was to blame. He's the one who seduced Adriana. That's what my wife told me. And they had it one time. The day you came to visit. You knave fool, exclaimed the mother, who did not expect such words from her son. And then she realized that Michael knew the whole situation only from Adriana's words. He had not spoken to his friend yet. Betty, as soon as she realized it, said softly, "Have you talked to Ethan or not? He promised me he'd tell you himself." "No. Call your friend now and have him come here right away. I want him to tell me everything in front of me." Michael looked glumly at his mother. The boy didn't object to his mother and complied with her request. Ethan answered immediately and said he would be there within the hour. Betty, hearing that the buddy would be arriving shortly, she nodded satisfactorily. An hour later, Ethan was sitting at his friend's parents' house, and in the presence of the landlady, he told her about his relationship with Adriana. Michael learned about the fact that the mate had been dating his wife for over a month now. Ethan also revealed that he sincerely loves Adriana and is ready to marry her immediately after the divorce. Michael looked at his friend sternly. At the moment, he didn't know who to believe. Only yesterday his wife had assured him that she had been intimate with Ethan only once, and now it turned out to be a completely different story. Michael was closely watched by his mother. The woman understood that her son is now unbearably difficult morally, and the young man nervously rubbed the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers. A pause hung in the room. Betty and the guest waited for Michael to speak. He, in turn, stood up and spoke clearly. "I've lost my friend anyway. And the rest, Mom, you'll find out later. And you, Ethan, it is no longer your concern. And a huge request never to appear on my horizon again. I don't want to see you under any circumstances. Just forget you ever had a friend." After these words, Michael kissed his mother and, without paying attention to his friend's outstretched hand, left the apartment. Ethan apologized to Betty and hurried after his friend. Michael, however, as soon as he saw that his former friend was catching up with him, told him firmly to stay away from him. Ethan tried to explain himself, but his companion looked at him menacingly and repeated his request with contempt. Meanwhile, Adriana was waiting for her spouse at home. She knew that her husband had gone to his mother. The young woman had already had a word with Ethan before then and asked the man to say that they had been intimate once. However, the lover said he would not do so. The young woman still hoped that Ethan would fulfill her request. And so Michael walks into the house, where the wife is sitting meekly on the couch. The girl looked at her spouse and immediately realized that her husband was talking to Ethan. Adriana lowered her gaze to the floor, waiting to see what her spouse would say. Michael came up to her and asked softly, "Why did you lie to me yesterday? Why did you lie to me yesterday?" "Ethan just told me about everything recently." "What are you talking about? You know perfectly well. You don't have to lie to me right now. It's not the best thing to do. In your case, it's more important for me to know the truth. Only then we can do something about it. I don't like lies, and I ask you to always tell the truth." In a low voice, the husband said, "Yes, Ethan and I have met many times, but I don't know what came over me. Your mother always reproached me for something, and I needed to vent, and I found Ethan to be that support. You're gonna ask me why not you. I'll tell you. It was hard for me to complain about your mother. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. I only love you. Believe it or not, I'm very sorry for what I did. Yes, I am. What else do you want me to say? I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now. You want to throw me out like a toy? Go ahead." After that, the young woman covered her face with her hands and cried. Michael looked at his wife, and it was unbearably painful for him to see a loved one crying. He went to her, lowered himself down, and gently kissed the barrel of her ear, and then said that he wanted to forget about the affair and never remember it again. Then he gently added, "Let's start fresh. I promise I'll never remember it, but you won't cheat on me again. This is the only way you and I can save our marriage. Understand that I love you very much, but I want to know that you feel the same way about me." Adriana responded by hugging her husband, crying and thanking him for his generosity. Michael tenderly pressed his wife to him and then kissed her on the lips, adding that from that day on it would be one and everything would be fine in the future. Several months flew by after Adriana cheated on Michael. Adriana completely stopped communicating with Ethan, and soon the young woman became pregnant. She was not particularly happy about this circumstance, as she did not want to burden herself with the troubles of a child. Therefore, Adriana decided, without saying anything to her husband, to terminate the pregnancy. The young woman went to the Women's Counseling Center and soon received a referral for hospitalization. However, Adriana did not manage to do as she had planned. Michael saw the referral, which the girl forgot to remove. The man immediately turned to his spouse. "What do you mean? You are pregnant and did not put me on notice. You and I agreed that there would be no more secrets between us. We're not ready to become parents at this time. You said yourself there are still business problems. And as far as I know, your mother's back to helping you financially, which you're not refusing. That's not an argument to terminate the pregnancy. I'm against it," the young man said emphatically and defiantly tore up the referral for hospitalization. Adriana realized that there was no point in arguing with her husband, because in this situation he would insist on his own. The girl shrugged her shoulders in displeasure and mumbled that then she would need double care and attention. Michael, hearing Adriana's words, looked at his wife with a joyfully perplexed look and asked her if you lacked my attention. "I don't mean that. Since I'm in an interesting position, I need to go to a sanatorium to rest." "All right, sweetheart. Everything you said is no problem." Michael was delighted that he would soon become a father, and he was eager to share his joy with his mother. Betty took the news with delight and congratulated the young family from the bottom of her heart and advised her son to be attentive to his other half. Time passed, and at the due date, Adriana gave birth to a baby boy who was given the name Liam. Michael rejoiced over the event like a child. He, while his wife was in the hospital, managed to make repairs in one room, organized it as a nursery. In this man was helped by his mother. She picked up wallpaper, and Betty, together with her husband, bought a stroller and a crib. Adriana did not appreciate the efforts of her mother-in-law and husband. The young woman saw that the room was now a nursery instead of a bedroom. Disappointed sighed Betty, noticed the grieved look of her daughter-in-law, and in bewilderment asked her daughter-in-law what she was not satisfied. The girl, holding back her displeasure, softly mumbled, "Now my husband and I have no bedroom. I told Michael that it's too early for us to have children. So when are the living conditions not ready? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? So live many families in a two-room apartment when one room is given to children and the second room is occupied by parents," replied the mother-in-law. "But you live with your husband in a three-room apartment, and Michael had a separate room, and you have bedrooms," Adriana said haughtily. Michael felt that if his mother continued the conversation with his wife, a quarrel might break out. So the young man, in order to diffuse the situation, suggested that they all sit down at a festive table and celebrate the birth of their son. Michael's idea was taken up by his father, saying to his daughter-in-law, "You gave us an heir, for which we are very grateful. And now, if you have a beautiful daughter in the near future, you will have a three-room apartment. No more children. I gave birth to Liam, and that's the end of it," Adriana replied firmly. Time moved slowly. Michael hurried home after work to babysit his son, and his wife, meeting her husband, complained that she was very tired to take care of the child, as the baby requires constant attention. The head of the family did not understand how Adriana can be tired of his son. Michael even addressed the mother on this occasion. He briefly outlined the situation. Betty listened attentively to her son, and without any shyness explained that Adriana loves herself too much and wants all the attention to be directed only to her. A year after Liam was born, Adriana said that the baby should be placed in a nursery. Betty was against this and was very clear about it. Liam is still very young. We should wait until he is at least 2 years old. You don't understand how 24 o'clock a day it is to be with a baby. I don't even have time for myself, and I want to have that too. Personal space. But you're a mother, you don't belong to yourself now, because you have responsibilities. And why put the baby in a nursery if you're not going to work? Betty said with indignation. What's work got to do with it? I don't think you heard me. I've been at home for a year without a care in the world. I'm entitled to a vacation, nervously exclaimed the daughter-in-law. Without deceiving others, Michael. As soon as he comes home from work, he immediately deals with his son, and you run to the spa or something. And my grandfather, and I often do not rush with my grandson. Adriana did not answer, but pressed her lips together, letting her know that she would do it her way. And as a result, it happened. Just a month later, Liam was registered in the nursery. The baby had been in the nursery for a couple of weeks as a cold. Betty immediately expressed to her sister-in-law that it was too early to put the baby in the nursery, as he was still small. Liam recovered after 10 days. Adriana wanted to take the boy to the nursery again, but here her mother-in-law resented her and said she would not allow it. Michael at this moment listened to the squabble between wife and mother and did not know how to reconcile them. And then the man realized, and he proposed to hire a nanny for the baby at least up to 2 years. Adriana liked the idea, and the young woman gladly agreed. Betty looked reproachfully at her son, letting him know that he had suggested the wrong solution. Michael perfectly understood his mother's displeasure, but at the moment he wanted to please his wife. And only because of this he did not change his decision. And soon Liam had a nanny, who was found through an ad. She was a 30-year-old woman. Her name was Kathy. She quickly found an approach to the baby and performed her duties perfectly. Michael liked the way the nanny treated Liam, but Adriana always had complaints about Kathy. And once again, when Adriana began to reprimand her husband that the nanny was not doing her job properly, her husband couldn't stand it and said, "You know, it's very hard to understand you. You wanted a nanny to look after our son. What's your problem again? Last time you complained that Kathy was looking at her phone screen more than she was doing Liam. And then you claimed she yelled at the baby when he dropped a mug. What happened this time? You just said that to me like I made it up. I didn't say that. I just want to clarify what happened again. Why are you mad at the babysitter?" The head of the family said with a frown in his eyebrows. "Okay, I'll tell you straight up. I saw that Kathy often looks in the refrigerator. Why don't you think it's strange? I mean, she didn't put anything in there. And then I noticed that we were missing some food." Adriana said. The man looked at his wife with bewilderment. This is the kind of news he had not expected. After a little silence, the husband asked his wife if she was sure of her words. Adriana irritably shrugged her shoulders and exclaimed that there was no point in lying to her. The very next day, Michael got up to go to work. He wanted to have a word with the nanny while his spouse was still asleep from the morning. He greeted Kathy as usual, said a friendly hello, and then, without any preamble, told her about the missing groceries. The woman, hearing this, blushed instantly and spoke indignantly. "To accuse me like that, you must have hard evidence. I will not deny that I look in the refrigerator, but only to get food for the baby. We had originally agreed that your wife would give me food for Liam, and I would only need to heat and feed the boy. However, Adriana Viktorovna sleeps until 11 in the afternoon, and I come to you at 8, and I need something to feed the child. So, in order not to disturb your wife, I take out what's cooked myself, and it's warming up. I all realize that, apparently, do not fit on some parameters, Adriana Viktorovna. She often makes me remarks off topic, and I'll be honest, that on these, I give reasonable answers. Just understand, I know my job. And if I make mistakes, I accept criticism adequately. But if you take your wife's comments, they are not justified. I apologize for the harshness. But it seems to me that Adriana Viktorovna should reconsider her views on life and stop picking on me over nothing. If I'm being rude now, you can fire me right now, after what I said. Kathy fell silent and bided her time. Looked at Michael, who stood thoughtfully interlocutor for a while waiting for an answer, and then wanted to add something else, but did not speak. The landlord noticed it and immediately asked, "It seemed to me that you did not say everything." "It all seemed to me. I'm just waiting for your decision." Michael suggested that Kathy take care of Liam. He decided for himself that he should talk to his wife tonight. The man realized he believed every word the nanny said, but the behavior of his wife could not understand. In the evening, coming from work, Michael told his wife about the conversation with Kathy. The young woman took what she heard in a peculiar way. Adriana told her husband that maybe I was wrong, and she was really picking on Kathy, and immediately added that all this is because she is tired and she wants to go to the sea. Her husband suggested waiting a month to go on vacation together. But then Adriana said that it will not be a vacation, as she will have to constantly look after the child. Michael, after this conversation for a couple of days, pondered, and his wife in the meantime, all his affectionately persuaded him to let her go to the sea. And the man decided that there is nothing wrong if his wife would go on vacation, and in a couple of weeks he and Liam would join her. When Betty found out about it, the woman turned on her son with an angry speech. She accused him of being naive and of allowing his wife too much. Michael listened to his mother, but did not change his decision. The young man said, "Mom, I don't see anything wrong if Adriana goes away alone now. Realize that lately she has become agitated. Everything irritates her. I want to see her again as the friendly girl I met. She'll be at sea without us for a couple of weeks, and then I'll join her with my son." Well, well, don't let them get you again. How was it literally after the wedding? Soon, Adriana went to the seaside. Michael called his wife 2 or 3 times every day. The wife would reply that she was doing well and loved it here. She described how she was spending her time. The husband then thought that he had done the right thing and let his beloved go before them. And then it was time to leave Michael and the baby to the sea, as Adriana called and said that she was leaving for home. On the questions of the spouse about the departure, the wife answered veilingly, without giving specific answers. The man did not argue and said he would meet her when she arrived home. Adriana explained to her spouse that the weather at the resort would be overcast for a week and there would be nothing to do. Adriana saw that her answer upset Michael, so she suggested going to the sea in a month. The man looked at his wife confusedly and said how simple it all works out. Wanted and again on vacation at the resort. And you did not think that this is a big waste in terms of finances. Believe me, the money in our family budget does not fall from the sky. I have to work my ass off practically every day. What are you getting so worked up about? Your parents make a good living. If you ask them, they will not spare a little money for their own son. Listen, but you and I are grown-ups, and we have to make our own budget, not rely on the help of our mother and father. It seems to me that you've forgotten what it's like to earn money. Maybe you should get a job." Michael said irritably. "Is that how you talk? All right, I'll go to work, but let your father tell me later that it's a shame to be a waitress." The wife said defiantly. That evening, Adriana defiantly went to sleep in the children's room. Michael tried to talk to his wife. He absolutely did not want to quarrel with her. However, the young woman haughtily told him that at the moment she did not want any more conversations, and the man had nothing left but to go to bed alone. The day after this conversation with his wife, Michael went to work in a gloomy mood. He was worried about his rift with Adriana. He was even more worried that his wife would actually go to look for a job as a waitress. He didn't consider it a shameful profession. He was more concerned that Adriana would be hit on by guys. And just this Michael imagined, as at the same moment he felt a rising wave of jealousy. Meanwhile, Adriana, as soon as her husband left for work, also got up and started to pack. The nanny looked at the young woman with surprise, as she had long been accustomed to the fact that she got up around 12 noon, and then washed herself in front of the mirror and went about her business, and returns closer to her husband's arrival. Michael could not concentrate on his work. He kept going back to his conversation with his wife yesterday. And then the man called Adriana, but she did not answer. Michael tried several more times to call his wife, but all his attempts were unsuccessful. On that day, he left work earlier than usual, and coming home, found that Adriana was not there. The landlord turned to the nanny, asking her where his spouse had gone. Kathy discreetly replied that Adriana did not report to her. Michael, in a shower of features, sat down in a chair and thought about it. And at the same moment, he heard the front door being rejected. The man jumped up and with a quick step followed into the hallway. He saw his wife smiling, who, seeing him, stopped smiling and only spoke softly. "You're supposed to be at work, aren't you? Where have you been?" The husband answered the question with a question. "You said I had to look for a job. That's what I've been doing. Let's forget about yesterday. We had a fight the first day you arrived. I missed you so much while you were away. You don't have to look for a job. I'd rather see you greet me than wait for you to come back, tired after a day's work." The man spoke softly and looked at his wife, waiting to see what she would say. But Adriana said nothing in response. From that day on, Adriana completely ignored her spouse. She behaved with him in an aloof manner. She went to bed defiantly in the children's room. Michael tolerated this attitude to himself for several days. He thought that his wife was just showing him her character. This continued for another week, and the man could not stand it. He decided to talk to his wife. He turned to his wife and said that he did not want to live with the woman he loved, as with a neighbor on the landing. Adriana looked indifferently at her husband and said, "I live with you. What else do you want? I have already explained my position to you. You sit at home doing practically nothing. You don't do anything with your child. Kathy told me everything. As soon as I go to work, you disappear after a while. What is it? Why don't you tell me where you disappear to? I tend to think you're having an affair. Tell me if that's the case. I don't understand you. Can I have my own space? Or do you think I have to report to you every time I do something? I'm not your personal item." "Okay, you're right about not being my property, but I need to know what my spouse does when I'm at work. Anyway, I'll tell you what. The day after tomorrow, you and I are enrolling our son in daycare, and you'll be dropping him off and picking him up on your own. If you're not happy with that, it's time to talk about divorce, because I can't live like this anymore, and I don't want to." "Divorce? Are you crazy? What about our son?" Adriana asked, puzzled. "Did you remember about the degree? Congratulations. I've told you everything. And then you can draw your own conclusions." After this conversation about divorce, Adriana changed. She became more affectionate towards her husband, and Michael thought it was necessary to talk about it earlier. The man hoped that now in their family again will be harmony and love. And in fact, for a couple of months, the spouses lived in idyll. And then Adriana asked her husband to buy a car. Michael was surprised by the request and asked why his wife needs another car when they have a foreign car. And also the head of the family added that he was always ready to take his wife wherever she needed to go. Adriana said that she wants to be a complete mistress of transportation and not to turn to her husband to take her to one place or another. Michael's mother found out about this conversation. Her son had told her about it himself. Betty became suspicious about Adriana's request and directly asked who, "Why do you need a car? You stay at home and you have nowhere to go. I understand if you were working, then it would be different. My son has already told you everything. I didn't expect anything else from him. What can I say to you? I just wish my husband would give me a gift like this, especially since he's already doing well with his business. It's dark. That's you, Adriana. You and I don't have a very good relationship, but my son loves you, and I wouldn't want you to hurt him. I'm not gonna hurt him, Michael. And if you love your son so much, help me get him to buy me a car. Maybe you and I will have a warmer relationship after that, my daughter-in-law said, and smiled amiably. I will think about your suggestion, Betty replied. After this conversation, 7 months passed, and Michael purchased his wife's automobile. His parents helped him buy the vehicle. Adriana, by this time, had already completed her driver's training. If Adriana was happy that she became the owner of the car, Michael repeatedly regretted that he had gone to the trouble of his wife and bought the car. And the thing was that since the moment when the wife had a foreign car, Adriana always disappeared somewhere. And then another event happened in the family, which unpleasantly surprised Michael. The man went to the chest of drawers, where the cash was stored, and found that there is no 1/3 of the amount. The head of the family was shocked, because without a joint agreement the money was not taken. Michael immediately called his spouse, but she did not answer. The man was dejected, but looked out the window. He did not know what to think in this situation. He was distracted from his thoughts by a phone call. Michael thought it was his spouse calling, but it turned out to be his mother, who spoke indignantly. I understand what's going on in your family, but your son should live with you, not with his grandparents. Adriana said that Liam would stay with us for a couple of days, but the boy has been with us for a week, and none of you have bothered to check on him. Wait, Adriana's mom told me that you yourself expressed a desire to take your grandson for 10 days. That's exactly what didn't happen. Your wife called me a week ago and asked me to take a couple days because she had some business to take care of. I said yes, and instead of 2 days, it's been a week, and there was no answer from you. I'll come and get Liam, said Michael, who was unpleasantly surprised for the second time that his wife had deceived him. Soon the young man was sitting at his parents' house. Betty looked at the frown on her son's face and purely intuitively felt that he was not doing well. The woman touched Michael's hand and affectionately inquired how he was doing. The boy looked at his mother and said nothing. Betty sat down next to her son and said, "You come on, don't get dark. Tell me what happened. I can see you're not calm. Things with Adriana and I are getting worse and worse. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I would do anything for her, and what I see in return is total indifference. Tell me why she lied to me about the degree. Adriana told me you wanted to take care of the baby, but she actually asked you to do it. And then there's the missing money. You've been robbed," Betty exclaimed. "No, Adriana took the money and didn't even tell me. The money is to buy goods for a trip I'm going on soon," the son replied. Betty wanted to continue the conversation, but Michael politely dismissed the conversation and then dressed his son and said goodbye to his mother and soon drove home with Liam. On the way, he called his spouse several more times, but Adriana did not answer. Adriana came home at the beginning of the 11th evening and, as if nothing had happened, asked her husband about his work. Michael was furious with his wife's behavior, and as soon as the wife went to the kitchen, he rushed after her and, barely restraining anger, said, "Maybe you can explain how I should understand you. You took money from the house secretly. You flashed Liam at your mother, and you're not answering your phone. I was very busy, so I couldn't answer. As for the money, I needed it for business. I decided to take an eyelash extension course. I didn't tell you about it. Otherwise, you would have started talking me out of it like you always do. That's why I took the money to pay for the course. I hope I've answered all your questions. Why would I talk you out of it? I'm all for you having something you love to do. But you know, it doesn't work that way. After all, you're my wife, and I need to know what's going on in your life. Don't you notice that you're living your own separate life away from me and my son? Where there's no place. You come home whenever you want. I'll tell you more about the last time you cooked dinner. Lately, I've been doing it. I'm sorry, but now I'm telling you everything, because I've already spoken my mind. I feel better now. And now, I'll speak out. I don't have the heart to cook, wash, clean. I just want to live and enjoy life. I've had enough of cooking in the village, scrubbing floors, planting seedlings. Now I want to live for myself. And I only signed up for the course so your mother would stop rubbing my nose in it that I'm a freeloader. And once again, you need your wife to do the housework. Then this problem can be very easily solved. A lot of people hire housekeepers. Why? And you and I can't do the same. This way we will solve the problem in one fell swoop. I won't have to do things I don't want to do. And you won't have to cook dinner yourself. What do you think of my offer? I'm starting to think you don't really need a family. We're not hiring a housekeeper. I'm suggesting that you rethink the way you look at life. If you don't listen to me, our marriage will eventually start to fall apart. Realize that I'm not an iron man, and my patience can break too. Adriana, after the last phrase of his wife, came up to him and gently hugged him, and then said that she would try to change. Michael was surprised by his wife's words. He did not expect her to change overnight. After all, only a few minutes ago, she was defending her point of view, and now suddenly she behaved differently. Meanwhile, Adriana stood on her toes and quietly suggested that we make love. Michael was completely confused after this phrase, because recently he and his wife had rarely had intimacy. The man did not bother himself with thoughts, but took Adriana in his arms and carried her to the couch. The next morning, Michael woke up and saw that his wife was not there. He was surprised, got up and went to the kitchen, where he saw that his wife was making coffee. The head of the family looked at the election with surprise. After all, the girl had never done this before. The man said in amazement, "You scare me. What's wrong with you? I told you that I will try to become an exemplary and caring wife. You didn't. I'm glad you did. I hope that it will always be so," replied the husband, and tenderly kissed the chosen one. A few days passed, and Michael was about to go to another city to pick up the goods. How did Liam fall ill? The trip had to be postponed because Adriana was traveling to an eyelash extension course. Michael wanted to ask his mother to take care of the baby initially, but Betty caught a cold herself. Liam recovered only 2 weeks later. During this time, Adriana only traveled for her training and immediately returned home. It seemed to Michael then that their married life with his wife was back to the way it was when they were a happy couple. As Liam recovered, he was put back into daycare. Michael intended to go on a business trip. Then his mother called him and told him that she wanted to go to a sanatorium and offered to take her grandson with her so that he could breathe the sea air. Michael told the news to his wife, and she was delighted with the news. Adriana told her husband that it would be wonderful if the son will be at the resort with his grandmother. She also added that sea air would be good for Liam after his illness. Michael agreed with his wife and informed his mother about it. And soon Betty went to the sea with her grandson. And then, after a few more days, Michael left for the goods. The man always left for 4 days, and Adriana knew about it. But this time, Michael arrived a little earlier. He wanted to surprise his wife. On the way home, the man stopped at a flower store and bought a luxurious bouquet of white roses. Michael imagined how happy his wife would be with the flowers, as he had not bought them for a long time. It seemed to the man that the bouquet would not be enough to make his beloved happy. Therefore, sat in a jewelry store and bought a silver brooch in the form of a soaring swallow. And Michael quietly opens the front door to his apartment with his key. Anticipating a joyful meeting, the man quietly passes into the hallway as he hears an unfamiliar male voice, which says, "Be patient, kitten a little more, and soon this show will be over, and you and I will live happily ever after." The landlord stopped in bewilderment. He felt the rage beginning to flare up inside him. Michael threw the flowers aside and hurried into the room, where he saw his exact copy in bed with his wife. The man was dumbfounded, and then the stranger, seeing the entrant, said with a smile, "I told you that soon the play will be over. True, it's not quite the ending I had planned. But since everything went like this, Then maybe it's true that fate loves you more than me. What brother? Who are you? You have a short memory, I see. You were born just a few minutes before me. The stranger grinned. Adriana looked at her husband with a sneering gaze, waiting for his reaction. Michael felt his wife's gaze and looked at her. The woman didn't take her eyes away. Only a sarcastic grin appeared on her face. The owner of the apartment could not believe that his beloved was currently in bed with a man who looked like 2 drops of water like himself. And only Michael was about to say to his spouse, Barbs. As the stranger spoke again, I think we can save the marital squabbles for later. Now, brother, let's get down to family business. You're not my brother. And get the hell out of my apartment right now. And don't tell me what to do now or later. You and I are never gonna get anywhere. Did you really forget you have a twin brother? Michael looked at the stranger, and somewhere in his subconscious mind, there was a memory of him hugging a boy who looked like him in his early childhood, and they were crying and saying something to each other. However, this memory was so distant that Michael thought it was his fantasy rather than a real piece of memory. Meanwhile, the doppelganger stood up, pulled on his jeans, and then sat down on the couch and asked Adriana to make coffee. The woman unquestioningly obeyed this request. Michael, this action angered, because his wife fulfills the requests of a stranger to him. The owner of the apartment looked with hatred at the guests, and again with a lordly tone suggested to him to clean up. The stranger laughed in response and said, "Don't talk, brother. I'm sorry that your husband seduced you, but I don't think she ever loved you. Judging by what she told me about you, I take it you don't remember me at all." "Well, I don't, although I can understand it, because you've lived well all this time. Your parents spoiled you. You're their only son. I, on the other hand, had a very different fate. Unlike you, I've lived all these years dreaming of finding your parents and making them suffer, and you too. I even came up with a plan, but you got back from your trip early. What are you talking about? You're gonna explain this now, or I'm calling the police. I can't figure out who you are. I don't deny that you look exactly like me. But there are many paradoxes in life, that there are people who are doppelgangers. But that doesn't mean you're my brother." That's when Adriana and Michael walked in. "Shut up." The young woman brought on a tray Turk-flavored coffee and coffee sets. The girl stirred the drink into a cup and invited everyone to the coffee table. Adriana first of all served a cup of coffee to the guest, and then to her husband. While doing so, she told her husband not to hesitate. "This man is actually your brother. His name is William. And I can prove it to you. I didn't really believe it at first either. He looks like you, and he looks like you. But he told me everything. All I can say is that William looks like you on the surface. He's a real man you want to be around. And how long have you been in a relationship with this man?" "How long have I been re-wearing my goat horns?" Trying not to raise his tone, Michael said. "After I got back from the resort. That's where I met William. That's why I didn't want you to go there with Liam, because it would have been awkward for me to meet William. You said you could provide proof. May I ask how you're going to do that?" Michael said. The young woman easily got up from her chair and without a word went into the hallway. She soon returned with a handbag. She took out a piece of paper and handed it to her husband. Michael took the sheet, unfolded it, and silently began to read. After a few minutes, the landlord looked at William in bewilderment and spoke a little audibly. "How can this be? It is impossible. What is it that surprises you so much?" "The fact that you have a twin brother," William asked. "Exactly. Why weren't you with me all this time?" Michael answered the question with a question. "That's not for me to ask, but for your parents. But at least you trust this document." Adriana did the parentage test. By the way, I'd like to say she took your money for the test, not for the eyelash extensions course. I gotta hand it to her. "Well, you've got a pretty smart girl," the guest said. "I'm not interested in information about my wife now, but you. Where have you been all this time? Why didn't you and I live in the same family?" Frowned Michael, who at the moment was in a state of shock. He had already reread the parentage test several times and scrutinized the signatures and seals on the document. William was silent for a while, and then spoke. The man told his brother that they had been born into the family forever. Drunkenness of their parents and guardianship authorities deprived their mother and father of parental rights, and then at the age of 3 years, the twins were taken to an orphanage, where they were brought up together until a certain point, namely almost to the age of 6. After that, a couple came to the orphanage and wanted to adopt the boys, but for some unknown reasons the adults took only one child, and the second one was not taken. Thus, Michael was raised by foster parents, and William remained in the orphanage. The landlord listened attentively to his brother. As soon as the interlocutor was silent, Michael shook his head without understanding, and then said, "I am not very strong in the laws of adoption, but I know for sure that it is not allowed to separate brothers or sisters. If my parents adopted me, they should have adopted you. That's a question you'll ask your mother or father, but not me. Your parents promised me they'd take me too. And for years I waited for them, but in vain. I'll never forget how we said goodbye and cried like girls and promised each other that soon we would live together again. Your parents promised me they'd come back for me. I asked your mother that question when I was grown up and out of the orphanage. Don't look at me like that. Yes, I was able to find your family, and I wanted a good reunion with my brother. But your mother forbade me to come within a stone's throw of you. That's when I went crazy. That you had everything like a normal kid, but I didn't. And you haven't even thought about me in all these years. Wait, take your time. I had vague visions that you were cuddling with a boy who looked like me. And then I remember asking my mom when we were picking up my brother. And then she said you were dead. And as time went on, I slowly forgot all about it. I mean, how old was I then? You know very well. And then after a while I asked my parents about you again. But my mom told me that I once had a dream about my brother, but I didn't really have anyone. So, I'm an only child, and I really thought I was. And now it turns out my mom lied to me. Stunned, Michael said, "I guess that's just the way it is. I told you that. These are questions you should be asking your mother, not me." The man said carelessly, "I will. But tell me why, when you left the orphanage, you met only with my mother and did not try to find me. That's a different story. I was going to do it, but I want to tell you right away that unlike you, I grew up not a boy, and quite a hooligan. I was registered in the children's police room, and when I left the orphanage, I visited your mother, where I was turned away. Then I wanted to see you, but I had important things to do at the time. Anyway, a bunch of us robbed a big store, and I was caught on CCTV. I was soon picked up, and I got time out of jail. I tried to contact your mother on the phone, but she soon changed her number. As soon as I got out of prison, I literally only got out for a few days before I got another sentence for hooliganism. Released early for good behavior, and I decided to take a little rest before thinking about how to continue to live. So I went to a resort where I met your wife. It was a real shock to me at the time. What kind of things can happen in life? A confluence of circumstances. I'm making love to my wife and my own brother. It was Adriana who told me I looked like her husband. And then she showed me your picture. I just asked her what her mother-in-law's name was. Adriana said Betty, and I had no more doubts. I thought it was just a coincidence, but when I heard your mother's name, I realized that it was your spouse who was really next to me in my arms. That's when I thought it was time for retribution. And after Adriana started talking about you, I realized that she would help me with everything. What did you intend to do next? Michael said quietly, "To become you." Adriana put your picture on my phone, and she and I went to the barbershop to get my hair cut, just like you. And within an hour, I looked like you beyond recognition. And then Adriana told me how you acted, how you talked to people. You know, she was just bringing me up to speed. What was supposed to happen to me? Michael, who had already guessed the answer, barely squeezed out a question. Do you understand? You were supposed to disappear. just disappear. You've had a good life already. Now it's my turn. Everything has to be fair. Don't you think so? William said nonchalantly. Would you take the life of your own brother? Michael said hoarsely. I've been thinking about this for a long time. You've done nothing wrong to me, you see. But I am offended that you let yourself live, forgetting about me. And I haven't been able to forget about you all these years. How many childhood tears did I shed at the orphanage? Being separated from my brother. How many times did I try to escape to find you? All that pain was stored in my heart for years. And one day that pain turned into hate. And about taking your life. No, I couldn't do that. But there are special people for that. For a good price. There was a man, and he's gone. And if I were you, I'd do you justice with your privilege. It's very simple, brother. Michael was glumly silent. He had not expected such a simple explanation from a relative. It was also unbearable for the man. It hurt that his wife, who had shared his bed with him, and had been lying without remorse, knew about all this. There was silence in the room. Each of the three was thinking about something else. Michael was the first to speak. He had just realized that his unexpected arrival had ruined the plans of the love couple. The man turned to his brother. Everything you planned has already gone to tatters. Your next move. You're not going to take my life with your own hands, are you? I already know what you're planning, so I can do something to protect myself. That's a good question, and I've been expecting it from you. It all depends on how you handle the situation. I've done quite well for myself. I've spent time learning your so-called habits, and it's easy for me to become you. You know exactly what I'm getting at, don't you? I might add that Adriana and I have even made an experiment in this matter. She and I went to your mother's house together. And guess what, Betty? No, she cured me of you. In short, your fate depends on you. I have nothing more to say on the subject. I understand you perfectly. Give me a few days. I have some things to sort out. Michael said thoughtfully. No problem. But if you want to go to the police for help, that would be your folly. Just don't forget you've got a little boy. Think of him. I don't need the police, and let's not make threats. Don't forget that the child is not only my son, but Adriana's too. And she's a mother after all. And I don't think she cares about the baby. The landlord spoke harshly. Soon William left, and the couple was alone. Adriana nonchalantly collected the cups on the tray and went into the kitchen. Michael followed. He stood and silently watched his wife wash the dishes, and as soon as there was an attempt, the last cup, he asked her to sit down for a conversation. The young woman shrugged indifferently, but complied with the request. The man felt that at the moment he wanted to hit the chosen one in the face, but he restrained this urge. Michael sat down opposite Adriana and glanced at her. The girl coolly endured the gaze, and after a few minutes said, "If you are going to make me regret something or make me feel remorseful, you're wasting your time. I didn't marry you out of great love. I just wanted to get on with my life, because I had no desire to go back to the village. You're not my kind of man, to put it mildly. You're basically a Rocklin. But your brother is a real man, a man you can go to the ends of the earth with. And I'm glad that show's over. How long did you intend to wait with William before you executed your plan? He told me I needed you to open a third outlet. You told me that yourself. And naturally, I told William about it. So we would have continued to play our roles for about another month," I said carelessly. "Did you think of Liam when you planned all this together with my brother? Why do you ask about the child right away? Would you have hired a housekeeper and paid her extra to look after Liam?" Adriana replied, "What kind of a scary person are you? I thought William was a scoundrel, but he's not. My brother's just a bitter man about life, and I understand him in some ways. But you, it turns out, I don't know you at all, and I'm amazed at myself at the moment. How I could love you and not recognize your petty soul. You'd do anything for money, even sleep with someone you don't love. I asked you not to appeal to my conscience. It won't work. You're not quite right about the money. Your brother doesn't have much, but I'm with him because I care about him. and I care about him a lot. Unlike you," the wife said pompously. "Living here alone, I'll be staying with my parents for a while. And a big request in my absence, do not organize a brothel here. You and William will have that opportunity soon. I promise you that." After this phrase, Michael hastily packed up and left the apartment. At the moment, the man wanted to talk to his parents alone. He wanted to know everything right now. He walked out of the entryway and got into his car and headed to his father's house. As soon as Michael arrived at his dad's house, he asked Benjamin without any preamble about the orphanage and his twin brother. The elderly man nervously grabbed his heart and began to slowly settle to the floor. Michael fearfully helped his father down and immediately called an ambulance. Benjamin was urgently hospitalized with a heart attack. Michael afterward called his mother and asked her to come home immediately. He would not ask his mother anything about his brother over the phone. The man only reported that he'd been admitted to the hospital. Betty promised that she would be on her way home today. Michael was anxiously awaiting his mother's return. He had a lot of questions for his mom. He also didn't know how to start a conversation with his foster mom. The man was worried that Betty would react similarly to his question about the twin brothers and end up in a hospital bed as well. The next day, Betty arrived. She left Michael Liam and herself went to visit her spouse at once in the hospital. Upon her return, the woman was depressed. Michael asked his mother how his father was doing with his health. Betty looked sadly at her son and said that today was much better than yesterday. And then the woman sat down tiredly in a chair and quietly said, "I know you want to know a lot of things from me. My father told me I understand that your twin brother found you and had time to tell you a lot of things. Yes, that's how I got the story from him. Now I'd like to hear it from you. How could it be that one boy was taken and the other left in an orphanage? Son, you just listen to everything. And then I don't blame my father for anything. He had nothing to do with it. Daddy did what I told him to do. You know how much your father loves me and you. He'd drop his pants just to be happy with you and me. Your father and I met when we were still in the first year of study at the Institute and immediately fell in love and soon married. We lived soul to soul, as well as now. Time flew by, and I could not get pregnant. Initially, we were even happy about this circumstance, as we wanted to get an education first, and then to have heirs. But we graduated from the Institute, and I could not get pregnant. A year passed, then another one. And that's when I rang the bells and started pestering polyclinics. I was examined and was told a terrible verdict that I was infertile. It was a terrible shock for me. And I then suggested to my husband to divorce me, as I knew that he wanted to have children. Ethan then called me crazy and said that means we will live for ourselves, and he would not divorce me, as he loves me very much. It's been a few more years. Your father and I went into business, and soon we were doing well. We could live and be happy, but I still felt like an unhappy woman. I felt like some kind of freak. Your father saw perfectly well that I resented myself for not being able to have children, and that's when he offered to take a baby from the orphanage. Initially, I did not even want to hear about it, because I did not believe that I could love someone else's child. However, my husband unobtrusively brought it up once in a while, and at some point I gave in to him, and we went to the orphanage. That's where I noticed you right away. You were standing on the sidelines looking out the window. You had a beaming smile at that moment. I pointed you out to my husband and told him that you would be my son. Ethan smiled and nodded affirmatively. At that moment, the teacher came up to us and told us that you were not alone, but that you had a twin brother. My husband and I looked at each other because we wanted only one baby, not two. And your brother came up to you at that moment. I looked at my husband again and suggested that he take both of them at once. The teacher heard this and asked us to go out into the hallway to talk. As soon as we left the playroom, the child care worker said that your brother has heart problems and anything can happen. And at that moment I said that we don't need a sick child and we will come another time to look for another child. We left. I was in a state of prostration for days. I kept dreaming about you and your smile. I didn't know what to do. That's when I suggested to your father that you be the only boy he could raise. My husband refused at first. He said we couldn't separate the twins, but I was able to convince him that a sick child is too much responsibility, so the second baby would be. It's better if he stays under the supervision of the orphanage staff. And so, before long, we had you. Michael sat in silence after his mother's story. He looked away and thought about something. Betty at the same time looked at her son expectantly, waiting for Michael to speak. After a few minutes had passed, the man looked at his mother and quietly said, "How could the orphanage give you only one twin and leave the other one behind? Son, money makes everything these days. Take my word for it. And in our case, we had a lot of financial help. I know it sounds horrible, but I was afraid to take responsibility for that boy." "That's funny. You're speaking for that boy. He's not a boy. He's my own brother, the one you separated me from back in the day. And that boy grew up and became angry at the world, not only at you, but at me. And all these years he's been waiting for me to find him or for you to take him away. Do you have any idea what it was like for me to hear him say that? William grew up hurting and hating me, although it's not my fault. And now he's plotting revenge with my wife. You heard right, my wife Adriana. And they've known each other for quite some time. Were you right? She didn't love me and only married me to live an easy life. But that's not the point now. It's why you lied to me about William being dead. Why did you make me believe it? What was the purpose of it? Son, I'll tell you again, I was afraid of the responsibility of raising a sick child. And about William dying, I thought that since you were separated as children, you'd better forget about him. So I said so. I didn't think that boy would remember you all the time. You were still at an age when childhood memories fade with tears in your eyes, Betty said. As you see, William has those memories. Have they not faded? What did you say? And one more question. Why didn't you report the time when your brother came to see you as a senior in the orphanage? Maybe he should have reached out and apologized to you then. And he probably would have had a very different fate. Muffled, Michael spoke up. I couldn't do that because I was afraid you wouldn't understand me. So I asked William never to come near you. I threatened the boy that if he dared to come near you, I would make his life unbearable. Realize that kids who are raised in an orphanage, they all go down a crooked path. And I was afraid that my brother would have a detrimental effect on you. Sobbing, the woman replied, "You ruined his life, just like you ruined mine. Now I understand why you changed your number. It was because William called you from prison and asked for financial support. And you decided to kill two birds with one stone. So you changed your phone number and you got rid of all thoughts of my brother. I never expected that from you. I can't deny I'm grateful to you for raising him. But I can't forgive you for what you did. I can't tell you anything now because I have to decide what I need to do about my brother. At the moment I will rent an apartment and live with the wall on my own, as I need to put my thoughts in order. Say hello to your father and let him get well. I can't visit him yet either." After these words, Michael left his parents' apartment with his son, leaving his mother there sobbing. The man actually wanted to be alone now to calm his nerves. Michael got into the car with the child and winked, spelled out that they would be single for a while. The same day, the man rented a studio apartment and in the evening drove to his place, where he saw his spouse sweetly chatting with his brother on the phone. The woman looked indifferently at the entering husband, who was holding his son in his arms. Liam, seeing his mother, reached for her. Adriana reluctantly finished talking to her lover. She picked up the baby. Michael, without further ado, picked up the travel bag, and he started to pack the baby's things and his own at the same time. Adriana at this moment indifferently watched her husband's actions. As soon as Michael collected the bag, he called Liam to him. The baby can hardly pronounce words. Asked, and Mom will go with us. No, son, your mom has better things to do. Let's not distract her. You saw how Mommy talked to a client who will be extending eyelashes. The head of the family grinned. Adriana smirked in response, and softly spoke. "Very funny. Let's get the baby involved in this whole thing. I think you did it yourself when you put your personal life on the line. You can't even talk to your son now. You want us to leave so you can keep talking to William. I want to tell you that you have nothing sacred and no maternal feelings for your son either. If that's all, close the door on the other side, because I have no desire to listen to your moralizing." "Not at all." Michael wanted to say something. Then he waved his hand, took Liam's hand, and left the apartment. The man tried not to think about his wife now, so he began to tell his son funny stories. The boy smiled in response, and when his father showed him a cow, the child laughed. Michael, on the way to the rented apartment, stopped by the store and bought dumplings, and soon father and son were already having dinner sitting in the kitchen. Liam tried to tell his father how he and his grandmother spent their leisure time at the resort. Michael tried to listen attentively to the child, but he did not succeed, as his thoughts hovered about his brother. After a while, the man put the pile to bed and himself thought about what he should do next. He didn't think about the fact that his brother could hurt him. He just didn't believe it. Michael wanted to make William thaw in his heart and stop hating the whole world. The man was only able to fall asleep when he awoke to the sound of Liam moving through him. Michael glanced at the clock. It was 9 o'clock. The man shook his head unsatisfactorily to work. He was late, and then he looked at his son, winked at him, and informed him, "Today, dear friend, we do worldly things and then get into work mode. By the way, I want to inform you that for breakfast we will have dumplings again, and we will have lunch in a cafe. And for dinner, can Daddy make you something? What do you want to eat?" "Fried potatoes," says the boy. "You got it. I'll make fried potatoes tonight. Now, let's eat quickly, and then to the kindergarten, so that I can take you there tomorrow, and then to my work, so that everything is clear on the spot after the cafe and shopping for provisions. After all, potatoes should be cooked from potatoes," Father said with a laugh. The next day, Michael took Liam to the kindergarten and went to work. Soon his mother called him and asked him tearfully to come and see his father. Betty said that she had told Papa about their conversation, and Benjamin became very nervous and worse. Michael, holding back his irritation, said, "Mom, why did you do that? You know perfectly well that Father mustn't be disturbed now, and you're just adding fuel to the fire. Do you really want your father to die early?" "Son, what are you talking about? I love your father, and I love you too. It's just that Ethan knows me well, and he got the whole conversation out of me word for word." Crying, Betty replied, "Okay, Mom, calm down. I'll be at Dad's in an hour. Just please, can we talk to him alone? It'll be easier for me without you, and Dad too. I promise I won't worry him any more soon." Michael was already sitting at his father's side in the chair beside the bed. The young man looked at his father and thought, "How can a man get so old in a couple days?" Benjamin put his hand on his son's arm and patted it lightly, then said softly, "You've had to hear a lot from your mother. I understand how hard it is for you. But believe me, it's hard for a mother right now, twice as hard. I'm very worried about her. She's the one who looks so strong, and in reality, a weak woman, not pushing her away. You can see now that I'm not a very good protector. My only hope is for you to believe in what we did to her. It's a great offense and God will punish us yet, but I would very much like to take the punishment myself, and I'd like to protect your mother from it, because I love that woman so much. Daddy, I'm having a hard time. I promised my mother I wouldn't worry you, but I don't want to deceive you either. For the time being, I need to cool down, and only then I can be myself. See, I'm being honest with you about everything. Man to man, I need to figure things out for myself, and most importantly, I need to get along with William. He's my brother. Well done, son. You said the right thing about your brother, and I believe you can do it. And you know, you've made me feel better. And about Adriana, get her out of your head. She's not worthy to be your wife. You'll find happiness on your way. I only have one request. Don't leave Adriana the baby. She doesn't need Liam. Yes, I think you know that yourself. I know it as well as I do, Father. And you get some tea and get well soon. Your grandson's been asking about you. I'll visit my mother one of these days. How are things at home? The son said, and gave his father a friendly pat on the arm. Leaving the room, Michael suddenly felt relieved to talk to his father. He himself did not realize why it had happened. The man drove to work after the hospital, then picked up his son from daycare. And when he arrived at the rented apartment, he thought about it. He watched the child playing with a steam train and mentally envied the kid that he did not have such problems as he had. Michael was distracted from his thoughts by a phone call. He looked at the display and saw an unfamiliar number. The man answered and immediately recognized the voice of his brother, who asked when they would meet. Michael, without hesitation, replied that the day after tomorrow. William clarified exactly where the meeting would take place, and the interlocutor answered him, "I think it will be on neutral territory. You know, I have long promised my son to go to the zoo. There we'll see the animals and talk. How's that sound? By the way, don't forget to bring Adriana along. She's not the last hero in this story, and she's not the only one involved. Who are you going to be with? Are you going to bring a support group in the form of police officers?" William said with a grin, "You're wrong. I'll be with my son. I want to tell you one thing on the phone, that I'm going to meet you to bury the hatchet. Think about it at your leisure." The next day, Michael, as promised to his father, stopped by his mother, who, seeing her son, immediately threw herself on her knees in front of him. The old woman, sobbing, asked for forgiveness. Michael helped Betty to her feet and asked her to calm down. "Your mother's sobs were all your mother said. Forgive me, I'm so sorry for you. Mom, you're saying it wrong. Your guilt is more for my brother. You should apologize to him first. But I think you might get the chance, but it'll depend on William. I'm going to talk to him tomorrow." "What are you going to talk about? You don't know anything about each other," Betty said, puzzled. "That will be the topic of conversation. William will talk about himself, and I'll talk about me. He and I need to make up for lost time. You just hang in there," and more than once. At the appointed hour, Michael stood at the zoo gate, holding his son's hand. He was waiting for his brother and his wife, and soon Adriana's car stopped near them. William got out of it. The men said hello, and after a few minutes Adriana came up to them and parked the car not far away. The three adults and the child followed past the zoo gate, and Michael was the first to speak. "Brother, I know you're upset with me, but you realize it wasn't my fault. I've talked to my mother and father about it. They honestly admitted that they were young, not then, and were afraid to take you from the orphanage because you had a heart condition. But that's a separate story. That's not what we're talking about right now. Don't pull the cat out of the bag and start with the main point. I want the main point. I have no desire to go and look at animals." William said with a sneer, "I'll get to the point. You're angry that fate has dealt you everything. But you are not right about that. A man is the blacksmith of his own happiness. For example, have you done nothing to achieve anything in life?" said the calm Michael. "Stop. Are you trying to lecture me now?" roughly interrupted William, brother. "Absolutely not. I have a proposition for you. Well, look, I have 2 outlets, and they're pretty well promoted, and I'm giving them to you. It's all gonna be done legally and legally. Adriana has a car, so you'll keep the car. Now we have to figure out a place to live. I have a 1-bedroom apartment. I could leave it to you, but Liam and I need a place to live too. There's a little problem here, and I don't know what to do. I'd like to hear your options. What's there to decide?" Adriana intervened in the conversation. The men turned to the woman, who continued to say, "Michael, you can move to your parents because they have a 3-bedroom, so you have somewhere to live. Adriana, I'm used to living on my own. I can only offer to exchange the 2-bedroom for 2 1-bedrooms. I'll make the extra payment myself." Michael said, "There's no need for an exchange," Adriana exclaimed businesslike. The brothers looked at the young woman again, She, in turn, shrugged her shoulders and spoke. William has a one-bedroom apartment that the state gave him when he came out of the orphanage. But it's in the middle of nowhere. So Michael can have it, and we'll stay in the two-bedroom that you've officially registered to me. How's that sound? Well, you're a woman of fire, said William admiringly. And then he added, you've got a super brain in your head. I picked the right woman for me. Well, let it be as you decide. We'll take care of all this business in a couple days. And now I'm turning to you, William. Can you burn the anger out of your heart and forgive my parents? Believe me, they're so sorry for what they've done, and they're having a hard time. My dad is in the hospital having a seizure because of this whole situation. I know your parents will be on their knees begging you for what they did. I wish you could find the strength to forgive them. I am ready to take off the last of my pants and give them to you, just to thaw your heart. And I say that with a pure heart. How easy is it for you? You know how they say, a little money, and all the years are gone. I can't do that, unfortunately. And what do you want me to do in this case? William said in a hoarse voice with excitement. I didn't say it was easy. But you see, if you and I have already met, perhaps this is our chance to be brotherly friends, not sworn enemies. Don't you realize that anyone can make a mistake? But you can't just go straight to the gutter. Yes, my parents made a terrible mistake, but they regret it. Just give them a chance. I can't promise you anything. I need time, said the interlocutor glumly. Michael smiled at the same time. William looked at the twin with surprise and said, what did I say that was so funny? Nothing, really. Nothing. It's just that you're saying exactly what I said to your father the other day, that you need time. You have almost all the same words and the same intonation as me. Apparently, Adriana has done a good job of molding you into me. His brother smiled. The adults laughed, and Michael thought that William might be able to get over himself and forgive Betty and Benjamin about Adriana after a while. Michael had a very different thought. In his opinion, this one had. The girl would always prioritize money over feelings. He even at the same moment realized that he had completely cooled Adriana, and it made him feel even better. In the evening of the same day, Michael went to his father and told him everything. Papa shook hands with his son and said that he had done the right thing and asked him to visit his mother. Michael did not resist and was happy to do so. After the hospital, he went with his son to his mother's house, where he also told her about the reconciliation with his brother. Betty, hearing the news, said the son hugged his mother and softly said no need to cry anymore. Everything is in the past. Now only time is needed for everyone to calm down a bit. You, mother, have often told me that time heals. So it should happen in our case. The important thing is to believe it. You can't go back to the past. You have to live in the present. The important thing is that William doesn't go down the wrong road, because he's had a lot of things in his life he shouldn't have. Son, I will obey your brother, and it's up to him to forgive me or not. But know, my dear, that I love you more than life, and I will try to love William as well. I know that God will punish me and my father. Ethan told me so. But your father has already been punished by the Almighty because he had a heart attack. It's my turn next, and I'll take it with dignity. Don't be silly. It's just that Daddy has a weak heart, and no one has punished him. And no one will punish you. We'll be all right. Now feed me and my grandson. We're hungry as wolves. I suggest even in honor of this to run to the store and buy a huge cake to celebrate such an event. It's not every day that brothers reconcile after all these years apart. And you know, Mom, William does look just like me. The man laughed, and Betty laughed too. Liam looked at the grown-ups uncomprehendingly and laughed merrily too.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Look, it's like an American movie, Adriana said. The night, the moon. It sounded so solemn, she felt. Michael was laughing now. Besides, he didn't like the moon. That big yellow fool, sticking herself out in the foreground for no good reason, he said. Well, Kathy, it'll light up the craters. It'll light up the craters. He imagines himself a second son. The moon, continued Adriana, and the two on the hill by the telescope. Beautiful boy, beautiful girl. I'll be right back to you. Smile. All 32 teeth. A dentist I know told me that. In the West, they put in crowns as white as a plumber's smile. I'll ask if there's life on Mars. Are you interested in complex forms, or will bacteria suffice? Michael was adjusting the telescopes to something unknown to her. She felt rather than saw his instantaneous flying smile. Compared, Adriana thought, how beautiful I am. Compared to him, so ordinary a face, they were both close to 18. Adriana is short, sturdily built with well-developed forms of dark brown and clean hair, and cut short her facial features are large, regular. Dressed simply jeans, sweater, no jewelry, no perfume scent. Only Michael, and maybe Ethan Forresters knew about the quiet abyss in which is known. In short, whether Adriana is good or not. It's still a question of a lover who will like it, who will not. But Michael, such a thin face, such eyes at him, look at him, mouth ajar and breathless. You stand there and you forget what you wanted to say. The prince is the scion of royalty. Of course he is. Michael's dad is not a king, but a minister in the regional government. Michael's mother is a ballerina, former prima ballerina of the opera and ballet theater. Now she teaches at a choreographic school. When Michael invited Adriana to visit, she invariably refused. She was uncomfortable. She was afraid that she would feel like a hostess who was being scrutinized through a microscope. She hesitated whether to swat it or let it run. What was Adriana to them? Zero. No stick. Fatherless. A daughter, teacher of Russian language and literature. For the 100th time to sort out the numbskulls, captain's daughter. It's not for you to decide matters of national importance or dance the part of Giselle. Michael's parents are probably afraid of the girl he's trying to be friends with, in case the unworthy candidate still manages to seduce their son. Does he need an ordinary wife? Michael will finish school, continue his education somewhere in London, get a job in the cloudy heights, then it will be possible to look around and choose a wife among equals. Until then, no. No, no. And this girl in jeans has to be taken away. No, she'll be treated quite nicely. But Michael called her. You'll be watching your favorite Mars. My favorite Venus, muttered Adriana. I hate the color red. Look, Michael looked at her even cheerfully. It's a scary business. 470 degrees in the shade. But remember when you showed it to me. It's as dazzling as a diamond, and its lands bear the names of our goddesses of love. Give it up, said Michael. Archipelago, and Char, and Aphrodite, and the land of Hellas. And then there are the mountains of Freddie West. Adriana remembered everything he had told her. But look, it's much more interesting here. Michael, what's here? Adriana nestled into the telescope, fixing her eyes on Marcelo's nose. It's not a big deal. It's just Buzina talking. Wait for it. We'll live to see the confrontation. Then everything will be for you, mademoiselle. With our pleasure, you'll see the polar caps of the sea in storms. Will you stop it already? Here, Michael. A mother's voice as clearly as if Christina was standing next to him. How long can you play with your stars? You're 18 years old, grew up Versta Kolomenskoy, all the same. Shall I remind you who's to blame? You should ask Michael. You and your mom. Not so often, but his mother still took him little to visit her friends. They were all young then, all dancing. Michael knew what was waiting for him there. Women as thin, smooth-jawed as his mother, and the same veins showing through on the high bangs. And they talk excitedly about ballet, about stage parties, teachers. If Michael had been asked, he would have said that he hated ballet, but not because of the director's tricks or the fact that his mother was interested in nothing but dancing. No, ballet had become his personal enemy. On a quiet evening hour, when he entered his mother's room without knocking, carrying Captain Grant's children in his arms, perhaps Mama would read to him. She was lying on the sofa, dozing by the climate-covered plaid. That plaid was always with her. She used to throw it over her shoulders as if it were a shawl. All Mom's energy went to the stage. And at home, she was fragile, tired. Peace all the time. She lay with her arm behind her head. Stretched out, her feet were bare. Michael walked over and forgot what he wanted to ask. He hadn't seen this before. He remembered his mom in high-heeled shoes. 30. Number 3. Cinderella. And the little feet were very much in keeping with Mommy's easy, graceful appearance. And at home, Christina invariably wore soft, Uggy boots. God, they feel so good. She kept repeating to change her shoes. Or did she say nothing? Just a blissful sigh of relief. And what he saw now were not his mom's feet. No, they belonged to some kind of monster. Unnaturally long fingers and pinky toes, as if broken calluses were stone, dark, on his left foot, the toenail on his big toe blue, like it's been hit with a hammer. And this is with a mother who takes such care of every little thing. Takes a long time to pick out her dress and jewelry. If there's a night out, she changes her hair several times. Michael guessed. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. Wasn't Mom tortured by her feet? Ugly feet and flying across the stage are two sides of the same coin. But how much does it hurt? Beauty. Michael remembers having the same blue elbow when he accidentally jammed his arm in a door. But his mom elevated every trifle into a tragedy, just as pain is not considered a tragedy. It doesn't matter to her, and it doesn't matter to Aunt Clara. But I'm sorry, he couldn't bear his mom's suffering. He's always been very sensitive to pain. And when Mom was telling a hard story about a performance that was excruciating for her, when she could barely hold on to the end, she noticed that Michael took hold of his whiskey. What's wrong with you? It hurts. It's like a bow to the heart. Mom remembered that expression and asked about the play. But it would be like a bow on the heart. So you want to hear it. And that time she, feeling Michael near her, awakened from fashion, intercepted his gaze and hurriedly tangled her feet. With a smile, she tried to show her son that it was nothing. It was nothing. But how beautifully, she said. Point in Russian just means point. A point. We touch the ground with 2 points or even 1. That's the calluses. You can fly only on their calluses, and rubbed his hair. Do birds have calluses on their wings? Michael asked. And since Christina did not answer immediately, he explained to himself. You can't see them. They have feathers. You'll go to the dance school too, said Mother. Like it's a done deal. You'll find out for yourself what kind of life it is. Did he shake his head? No. But Christina didn't react in any way to his no. Apparently, she just decided not to insist at that moment. However, she had determined Michael's fate for herself. Understand that she proved to her husband, who was not thrilled with the fact that the son will be made more Ron. Michael, on the other hand, would be Siegfried's ideal. He has the data. I get it. Michael almost burst into tears. So you're serious? Stop mocking me. I'm not going dancing. He imagined mangled fingers, all the body aches, and the daily grind at the bear. Just show them to the committee. Just show them to me. Christina convinced him a few months later. What have you got to lose? Don't worry. They'll see your sour face, and they'll give you a turn and go frozen. The admission tests were held in 3 stages. Michael on the girl couldn't. There were more girls in the crowd. Want to volunteer to sit on the ballet galleys, fat and thin, tall and short haircut. And with a bow, someone is nervous and pulls Mom's hand. Others repeat the voiced dance moves. Others have tears in their eyes. Michael defiantly turned away to the window. It is better to look at a rainy day on a wet black path in the park, to follow the drops running down the glass, than to look at this general madness, or to hear the usual annoying whispers. Look, 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 what a handsome boy. A quarter of an hour later, the handsome boy stood in front of the admission committee, and despite the fact that he was almost naked in just his panties, looked at the maestros mockingly with a look all those. Turn around, raise your head, stand on your toes, he performed quickly and carelessly. and the same mockery was felt in his movements. "He's a perfectly built boy," the older man said. "Of course, maybe he'll grow up too. But for now, yes," the lady supported him softly. As smoothly as his mother, she came up to correct his arm, and he noticed what a beautiful brooch on her chest. At the bottom of the deep cut of the black dress in the stone, a glow shimmering, sparks like a starry sky. The dropout was big, very big. When she and Christina were leaving, Michael saw tears in the eyes of not only the children, but the moms as well. In the second phase of the trials, the doctors took over. Here there were fewer marriages. About 100 people reached the third round. Of them had to choose 30. "You will be played a piece of music," Mom forced and offered to dance. "I'll dance for them," Michael thought. And finally he's standing in the middle of the hall. The accompanist is a little extra on the piano. She started to play. Michael recognized the waltz from the first bars, and not wanting to act, he threw off his arms and spun. He flew around the big hall, enjoying the freedom, because it was still cramped at home, and here you can run around. A few minutes later, Michael opened the door. Christina stepped up to meet him and got what she wanted. Almost hatefully, he shouted. I was accepted and went ahead of her down the hall, putting his hands in his pockets, not wanting to look back. Seeing me off and whispering to the crowd. He didn't need ice cream now. He studied at the school for 2 years and finally became convinced that they have nothing in common with ballet. All those endless rehearsals, shouting teachers. Long leg, long leg, long leg. Step back on your left foot. You, or rather the foot, let the heel smile. And this pain that came as he expected the dreams and excitement of his fellow students, about roles, about performances. It was all completely foreign to him. Dove said, at last, to his mother, the old pedagogue Zakar. Having studied in vain all this time with Michael, don't you drive him with a stick along this path. A slave is not a praying mantis. Your boy deliberately doesn't want to do what I believe. How do you expect him to go on learning? Do you know what high school is like? Don't torture your son. Put him in a regular school. Christina was silent for a few days. Michael didn't interfere. He didn't approach her with questions. He understood his mother had to get over the collapse of the dream of his ballet career. So what? Soon everything would be back to normal. And to get under the hot hand to hear harsh and unfair words he did not want. In the end, his parents put him in an English special school and took a breath. Still, not exactly a rank-and-file path. The school is elite, and the child from a long struggle with ballet took it as a respite. And she's doing great. The only memory of the past. Mom takes him to visit her when she has a ballet society gathering. You'll remember later that you knew these people. Maybe if Michael were older, he'd appreciate them. But to a 12-year-old boy, talking about ballet is intolerably boring. And they don't even finish the sentence. They just start to say a few words, and then they laugh. They understand. They're their own. Aunt Clara doesn't have a cat or a dog. Michael had already eaten the cake. Now that the diet was over, he was putting in his second piece. Stretching the pleasure with a spoon, he poked windows in the soft biscuit and imagined that it was a knight's castle and from above along the Kremlin in their one-time walk centuries. Sitting mentally recalled the novels of Walter Scott, and the piece disappeared unnoticed from the saucer. Finally, Michael crept away into the big pale green armchair and dropped his head on his arm. He sat as artistically as his mother's embodied wistfulness. Aunt Clara, passing by, stroked his hair lightly. Poor failed Siegfried is bored. But look at this. The pictures are pretty. I lowered into his lap an expensive, heavy volume. It was an album called Mysteries of the Universe. Telescope pictures of planets, stars, comets, nebula. Michael gazed out and up the world and disappeared forever. Before him lay galaxies and crystal whorls. Inexpressibly bright comet tails of unearthly colors splashed. Where does the path of these eternal pages begin, and where does it end? And what mesmerizing names of stars. Ahurnar, the abode of daisy Antares. One of Michael's favorite fairy tales was the story of Jack, who threw magic grains into the ground. From them grew babas, reaching for the unknown heights. What's beyond the clouds? Jack thought, and he climbed up into the sky. And on the clouds stood a fairy tale castle, and the story began, which Michael lived many times, mentally reincarnated into Jack. A single cloud with a castle on it and an enchanted princess who could be conjured would be enough for him. But deep down, Michael had always known it was a fairy tale. What he saw now, however, was a truth that could be seen with his own eyes every night. And what was inaccessible to the eye was confirmed by telescopes. So why do people live past this? Why was no one he knew shocked by it as he was now? Michael knew it from himself, from his family. They don't see the night sky for years. Forget there are stars in the sky, busy with their own things, so small. Before this splendor, before these worlds, living, breathing with them, pulsing. Mama instructed Adriana to pick the last of the grades. Once upon a time, the cottage was loved by the whole family. One of Vera's first memories is of her father building a small white brick house. Then it is covered with wooden carvings and next to the pool for the child to splash. And Rosnef's mother is happy. She has always loved this labor on the land, planting thin branches. This will be a cherry tree. This will be an apple tree. Then the parents separated. Adriana was 6 years old. She understood what had happened in a childish way. Daddy was taken away by Aunt Cindy. He packed very quickly because Mommy was yelling at him, took his suitcase and left. Yesterday was today, no sign of him. Mom decided not to call Dad, no matter what happened. She cut out of the local newspaper phone numbers of different firms like Man for an Hour called, so that from there they came to nail up, to fix. The dacha was the most dilapidated of all. At the end of that September day, Adriana felt like an acrobat, balancing on the balcony to reach the grades. It would fall off. 3 meters to fly. And down below, the pool my father had built was empty. Now, once in a lifetime, everything will fall into it. And then how to get help. Going down was even more difficult. There was a heavy bag in each hand, and even on the railing one could not count on it. We couldn't grab them with our teeth. It was getting dark, and Adriana walked along the deserted dacha streets cautiously. Who else might she meet? And against the sky she saw a silhouette. On the hillside, a man was setting up something that reminded her of a telescope. Their eyes met, and Adriana had never before shouted at a stranger. Suddenly, she asked, "What's that?" "I'm sorry, of course. But it's dark. You can't see anything." And just as unexpectedly, Michael suggested that you'd like to see it. They were on their way back. Michael always saw Adriana off. It was her mom's request that he take her to the driveway. But if her mom hadn't said a word, they themselves have developed a ritual of parting, a confident door. "I want to ask." Michael stopped. He stood, now blocking her way. And she could tell from his voice that he was very uncomfortable. "Will you marry me?" That her face trembled as if it had never even occurred to her. "What are you talking about?" And she got ready to go again. "Wait," he held her back. "You just don't want to. Then there's no question about it. Or you're saying no because there's another reason. Wait, I don't get it. What made you decide to get married in the first place?" "Well, girls want to get married. So there's 7 of them. But nowadays, who gets married at 18? Exams are coming up. Then my father wants to send me to London to study." She lowered her head. He noted her grin, and the fact that she couldn't raise her eyes to him for a while. "So you're afraid of London with me?" He kept his hands on her shoulders. Adriana couldn't find a word for it. "Aw, you understand how I'm going to live. I'm out there, and you're in here." With despair, he asked, "We've been apart for years. We're at war at home now. Because of me." Adriana was afraid. "No, I'm not going because of England. I'm not going anyway. Let them do what they want. But you and I should not be prevented from pulling, separating. No parents, no more hiding, no more excuses. Your father and mother will never agree to me," Adriana said quietly. And that London. They'll send you there anyway. And then marry a rich man with a whistle. When they decide it's time. Listen to me. Michael looked into her eyes, and now she couldn't look away. No one's sending me anywhere. If my parents accept you, you will. I will. Adriana said. I'll close my eyes. I will agree and live in this fairy tale for 10 minutes, and then I will open my eyes. Michael leaned over and kissed her. It was the second hour of the night. No one was in the park, and they stood there, embracing and singing to each other. They couldn't tear themselves away. For the first time, this lust for them broke through, and neither one could sway it. To the first, everything ceased to matter. Adriana had forgotten already that her mother was waiting for her at home. It hadn't occurred to Michael that his parents might be anxious just to be together. That was the only thing that mattered. Adriana didn't remember her heart pounding like that. The willow branches swayed in the sky in the breeze. The stars seemed to sway with the young leaves. Mom didn't turn away from the window when Adriana came into the room. At least he saw her off. Mom sighed. She realized how brief this pair of maidenhoods would be for Faith. Forgetting everything and wandering with her beloved by the hand. The exam wasn't called, Mom said. I'm sorry. I forgive him because he does walk you to the driveway. If he didn't walk you home, I'd forbid it, so you wouldn't have to feel guilty and make excuses. Adriana remembered Michael's words. Very hungry. What? She said, quietly distracting her mother's thoughts that you're not turned on to the cafe to have dinner. Parents do not give money to love and feed. For Mom were synonyms. Now she was suffering that Adriana had been hungry all evening and therefore neglected and unloved. Mom believed that she and Adriana were the two she and Adriana had left for each other. The only picture kept in the album was one where Mom was taken with her father. At one time, Adriana had kept it from being torn up. Here you are so young, good Mom, never feeling sorry for herself and willing to stay up late into the night sick or well, cooking, drinking, and washing. But Adriana was born and turned out to be a weak, sickly child. The frail girl seemed to her father to be from another planet. With a sturdy boy, everything would have been clear from him. From the very beginning, the father would start raising a real man and a soldier, and all those doll bows under the crocheted throats. In the middle of the night, Mom would get up to warm the beast. Milk to take away the coughing. She'd turn on the light. They had a one-room apartment and saw her husband annoyingly cover his head with a pillow. Maybe you should take a vacation and go somewhere in a preventorium to rest, Mom suggested, forgetting herself again in the preventorium. Dad liked it. He was an excellent dancer. And for 3 weeks of vacation, he danced Cindy, a cheerful blonde. When he came back, he wasn't himself. He was so gloomy, he wouldn't lift his head. Adriana's mother told me years later. I kept asking him what was wrong, and he wouldn't say a word. He wouldn't say a word. Then he told Kathy. Kathy, the worst thing happened. I went over everything in the world. I thought he'd been recruited by a foreign intelligence agency. And he told me, I met another woman. It was the only time in my life my mother ever beat my father. I don't remember what I grabbed then, just a pot lid. I think he only covered my head with his hand. You see, I wanted what was best for you. You're sick. I did the remodeling without him. Wallpaper. The service is hard. Let him rest at home. He's such an animal. Father decided that he'd been punished enough, and now he could leave with a clear conscience. He packed his things and moved in with Cindy. Apparently, even she couldn't believe it was so easy. And the ex-wife doesn't try to get her husband back, at least for the sake of the child. So Cindy insisted. The father appealed to his superiors, and he was transferred to somewhere in the suburbs, where the young couple and departed. The reminder of the father remained a receipt for alimony, once a month, appearing in the mailbox, and my mother's firm conviction that she herself would never try to arrange a family life again. I can't face the table a second time. Don't believe it. No luck. That love, deceit, fake gold. One pain, not to be alone in old age, It's better to give birth to a child and then touch a man. We'll grow up, Mom said. In her heart, no doubt that this is the only option that awaits Adriana. I'll help. And the main thing for you now is to finish the institute and find a good job, so that you don't depend on any Porsche in your life. Michael's mother didn't like him, but she tolerated him because he was raised in a decent family, and the rite of courtship, memorable to his mother since his youth, he performed rigorously. He asked permission to take Adriana for a walk and brought her back on time. Mom thought that nothing serious would come out of this relationship. Adriana was no match for this boy, as they say nowadays, a major. But if still Mom was afraid to think about it, let her daughter give birth to a beautiful and healthy baby. You can tell by Michael's good blood. And the grandparents on the other side will help. It's so hard to raise a child alone. Still, Mom wanted Adriana to be just her daughter for as long as possible, with the simple worries of what to wear, where to go, what book to read, so that no men would intrude on their little world. Kelly was a small, dark-haired, hairy girl with a look that was all her own. Amazing femininity. Adriana had been friends with Kelly since first grade, and in recent years the girls had sat at the same desk. Adriana kept peeking out, and I couldn't wait to tell her about yesterday's proposal. But where had she gone? The class was about to start. Kelly ran into the classroom at the last minute. Her plaid dress was cinched with a wide sash. Her waist was as slim as an actress in the last century. "Where have you been?" "Mother, you know," explained panting and Kelly, laying out her textbooks on the desk. "Dresses yesterday washed on the balcony, hung not dried. I didn't even have time for breakfast. The iron was up to sushi. And Michael called me to marry." Adriana wanted to say it nonchalantly, like a cursive, but a smile blossomed irresistibly on her face. "Wow," Kelly whispered in shock from the old man already entering the classroom. "And when last night?" "That's not what I mean. When he wants you to get married right after graduation, and his parents agree Williams and Smith," said an old man. "Why don't you let me start the lesson? It's people like you that make it hard to explain things. Keep your mouths open. So open your notebooks, write down the new topic, and then read the textbook and the outline." We had to wait until recess, and then Kelly bombarded Adriana with questions, the most important of which was, "Is there really a wedding?" "Not a jinx." "What are you afraid of?" "Even the prince is marrying anyone nowadays." "Thank you. I'm already off the scrap heap, you know." My friend attacked Adriana again. "My older sister left me a hat and some beautiful white gloves in a box on the mezzanine. I'll go get it. My mom keeps everything. And she says, 'Kelly, don't get married so fast. I haven't had time to save up anything. If you get to the registry office, I'll go to the world.'" After school, Kelly and Adriana usually took a leisurely walk home. But today Adriana was on class duty, along with Ethan. So Kelly sighed and went home alone. Ethan was a tall, blond boy with a keen eye. Ethan was always dressed in the same protective color, a light jacket twist open, revealing a calfskin jacket. Everyone knew that his father was a forgotten alcoholic, and since Ethan was a little boy, he was considered the only male in the family. Usually the duty officers divided the class in half. You wash half, and me half wipes the blackboard, watering the flowers with a mop. "I can do it myself." Ethan quit, scrubbing the floors. He was surprisingly dexterous in his sporadic movements, twisted a heavy rag from the worn linoleum, and the classroom became clean. "Will you go into the army and ask for the Navy?" Adriana advised. "Field strange plant in the form of a green stick, from the top of which leaves fan out. Your ship will always be shiny." Ethan said nothing, just looked at her. "No, seriously. Where are you going?" Adriana asked. Ethan replied reluctantly, mopping under the teacher's desk. "Polytechnic. I guess I'll give it a try." Adriana sighed sympathetically. Polytech seemed little better than the army to her. All that creepy math, the blueprints at school, she treated the exact sciences as punishment. They were the hardest for her, and here she was volunteering. Are you really interested in all this? She made a gesture as if drawing. There's not much I want to do. There's also such a thing as real life. Ethan lifted his head and suddenly smiled at her. Adriana had never seen him smile like that in all these years. It was short, but bright and trusting. And she also remembered that he went first in his biology class and all the animals. From the living corner, he was adored by parrots, sat at his outstretched hand for long periods of time. And Bella and the rat almost did not climb to kiss. He put them on his shoulders, several at a time, when he cleaned the cages. But you couldn't study biology in their town. You had to leave. And Ethan probably couldn't do that with his sick mother. Polytechnic Institute, 2 bus stops away, and the competition was low year after year. Where do you think you're going? Ethan asked. I don't know yet. With Ethan, everything is still hanging in the balance. She suddenly wanted to tell Ethan how scared she was, whether everything would work out, but he was the one she couldn't tell. So she held back, and he sensed something, standing beside her, hesitating. Finally, he stepped back. When the cleaning was done, they locked the classroom and went out onto the school porch. A warm breeze blew into their faces. The gardens were already matchmaking before school. And then Ethan asked you that way. I have to go to the nature store too. The fish had finished feeding. Then their paths diverged. Ethan ran to the other side of the street, but after walking a few steps, Adriana looked back and saw that he was already up on the porch of the store, Nature standing there looking after her. Lunch was coming to an end. When Michael was a child, it was a never-ending dreary ceremony. Time after time, he had to listen to his mother's remarks about how to sit, how to keep his back, what fork to take. And the most painful was the feeling of hunger, which did not go away even after the meal. Christina considered gluttony a great vice. It's suicide to poison yourself with an extra bite, she repeated. And the plates usually had something symbolic on them. Then Michael became accustomed to the regimen and no longer noticed it, and was content with little. So what have you decided about London? Asked Rick about his lips with a napkin. If you are determined not to leave, maybe apply to our university. Dear parents, the family was used to this slight irony and accepted it naturally. Michael pushed his plate away. Let me make a counter-proposal. I will enroll in any institute of your choice and graduate in good faith. The parents looked at each other. So you didn't believe in any of them? And your astronomy? And what do you demand in return? Asked Rick. He knew that his son's word was unbreakable. And now, if he gives them a chance, it is possible to make for him the most important step that will determine the future of Michael. He would put his son through law school and then take him into the ministry afterward. So clarified Rick. In his heart, he was ready to make all possible concessions for the sake of the main thing. Michael held his breath. Right after graduation, I'm getting married. Christina dropped his hands powerlessly in his lap. I don't even know what's worse, she said. Wait, gestured Rick to stop her and clarified businesslike, we know this girl. It's unlikely she hasn't come to us. And how long have you known her? The last words the mother emphasized the second year. But you're not getting married because she's a face. Has she distorted it? No, mother, she's not pregnant. I would also like to add that no one is blackmailing me. Yesterday when I proposed to Adriana, she was even more surprised than you are now. So you've already made up your mind. What if Dad and I had? Mom, let's not play out the drama of parental despotism. An autocrat. And hair. Do you remember how old I am? Do you know that I can make up my own mind? You still want drama. Go ahead. Disinherit me. I agree. Christina sighed and looked at her husband. Rick, as always, was reserved. He didn't like to show emotion. And the questions sounded specific. Can you tell us in a nutshell what your chosen one is? Michael shrugged his shoulders. Her name is Adriana. She's the same age as me, and she's graduating from high school. And her parents. Do you want to know if she's our type? No. Mother's a teacher, divorced. I don't know the father, if there ever was one. Christina, without raising her eyes, nodded her knife on her plate. Katya. Rick stopped her. We'll talk to you in private. And you're him, Michael. Tell your Adriana we're inviting her to dinner. We should get to know each other better anyway. Dinner was served in the small dining room, where the family usually gathered. Michael saw that as a good sign. Only the immediate family was invited here. But maybe Mom just decided that there was no need to parade some girl from the back alley. The parents were already seated at the table. Rick stood up to greet Adriana and pulled out a chair for her. He took a seat at the head of the table, Christina at his right hand and Adriana now at his left. Michael sat down next to her. Adriana kept her cool, at least outwardly. Barely had she poured her half cup of soup as Adriana nodded. Enough. Was she hungry? Michael didn't know, but she ate without showing appetite, just like her mother. So I gather. Are you graduating from Adriana High School this year too? Rick asked. And then where? Probably on the mobile path. Russian and literature. Yes, we have to do that. Rick nodded. The Russian language is in a terrible state nowadays. I myself did not abuse it at school, as they say. 4s mostly, no more than that. Komsomol work took all my strength. But what's being done now? It's impossible to convey. You know, I have to look through a lot of documents and sign them. So believe me, I'm horrified. My young people are ministerial beauties, all with higher education, or even two. They'd write something that would make you laugh, or call an interpreter to explain it to an old man. What were they trying to say? At one time the country rose for money, decided that the humanities do not earn much, and now it's cleaning up the mess. Oh, dear mother. Rick put his hand to his cheek. Michael felt that his father's friendly tone touched Adriana. She obviously did not expect such attention, and answered him with an uncertain smile, in which sincerity was already evident. You must read a lot, Adriana. Michael, what does she like? That's rare these days. It's nice to meet such an attentive gaze. How are you looking at me now? It's the look of a man who reads. She put a big plate in front of Rick. The roast must have been cooked separately for him, because everyone else was served much smaller plates of stew and vegetables, herbs, unknown fish. Not a serious meal in my household, Rick said. Perhaps, Adriana, you can keep me company later. We'll eat humanely. Or are you an advocate of healthy eating too? A slight sound escaped her lips. Christina reminded her of being used to judging her ballet girls in terms of classical figure or marriage slouchy. She didn't like the look of Faith at all, which promised a heavy womanhood in the future. Didn't you take dancing lessons yourself, Adriana? It was Rick again. I did, Adriana nodded. In the 7th grade, an aunt came to us and started to persuade us. Promised they'd teach modern dance to the sick. She got all the girls excited. But when we came to her at the Palace of Culture, it turned out that she probably went to all the schools and the girls gathered. There was nowhere to stand. So this madam organized the selection, and you didn't pass it. That's not true. I was almost the first one out. I had to dance. You know, the 1, 2, 3 waltz across the room. I got confused about which foot to start on, and the lady yelled right away. It's pretty familiar. Christina, nodded Rick. Then we were gathered all the enrollees and comforted because some of the girls were crying. We were advised to do something else. I was sent to the puppet theater to work with puppets. I needed those puppets. What are you interested in now? Adriana shrugged her shoulders slightly. Art. Yes, I still love it. But it's a bit of a drive. The Philharmonic Theater is across town. And then there's grad school. That leaves books. I read a lot. You're not interested in politics. It's not my thing. Well, thank God. It's a man's business, after all. Rick's up. Well, darlings, let me say goodbye. I'm due at the ministry at 3. Passing Christina, he touched her hair with his lips and whispered, quite a nice girl. And there was no need to worry beforehand. But Christina sat tense, silent, and he never knew what she thought about it. The prom was over. No other way to put it. The school cafeteria thing didn't work. Rich parents insisted we should rent a floating restaurant, the one by the riverport. Of course, the grown-ups promised there wouldn't be much alcohol, just a little bit, but everything went as it went. And by 1:00 a.m., I ran into Lisa's class. We have to get Betty or she'll fall in the water. Betty, the tallest girl in the class, was so drunk she couldn't think straight. At first she sat on the steep metal steps of the gangway and resented why the damn steamboat was rocking so much, even though the floating restaurant was deliberately offshore. Then Betty slipped down the gangway. By some miracle, she didn't break her leg. As we know, the drunk is lucky. Now Betty was standing over the side and throwing up. Eventually, Betty was laid on a bench on the upper deck by the class, covered her with her cloak, and Betty fell asleep. The three of them sat in a corner of the room, Adriana, Kelly, and Ethan. Adriana didn't want to wear her royal blue dress. It would have drawn stares. I had to explain where it came from. And Adriana was afraid to jinx it just yet. Didn't even mention Michael. And the dress she was wearing was that simple cast-on sheath that her mother had dreamed of. I sewed a light-colored suit and went out into the world for the first time. That's it. From now on, we'll only see each other at get-togethers, Kelly said. Slow music started playing. Ethan took a sip and asked Wind if he would go dancing with me. I misfired behind, nodded, and prepared to kick Adriana under the table with my foot. Had she refused, but Adriana rose with a smile. Only now she realized Ethan was in love with her and wanted to give him a happy moment. She didn't just put her hands on his shoulders, but snuggled up to him. And it made her feel good to feel his strength, his gentle hands rough against the warmth of his jacket. She reached her cheek to his shoulder, sighed involuntarily at his scent, and felt herself breathless with excitement. And she was so at ease. She pulled away and smiled affectionately back at him. At his look, at that tense question. "You'll be all right," she said, and hugged him again with the movement of the dance. And it was a farewell hug. The wedding was played at the campground. It began with a question from Christina. EP, as mentally dubbed the future mother-in-law Adriana Liss, who became a magazine and pointed to the wedding dress. "Adriana, do you want this lace craze?" Adriana shook her head. Not at all. She almost didn't believe there would be a wedding, and was tiptoeing around the issue, trying not to attract the attention of fate. She and Michael had agreed to drop by the registry office on a weekday to get married, as long as nothing went wrong, and everyone got off their backs. The campgrounds are on the shore of a lake, and there are several other lakes nearby. So everyone sat at the table and dispersed. Michael saw his mother and father sitting on the shore in a deck chair, and Christina's face is peaceful. The mother listens to the nightingale singing. Michael did not understand how one can come to nature and turn on full power music. Nature has its own concert hall, and this every time unique melody people hear so rarely. The glitter of small waves, the sound of young leaves, the rolling grasshoppers, and never do they pour in so self-consciously as they do at this time of year. Birdsong. Good, said Christina with her eyes closed. God, it's good. Are there fish here? Rick asked. Michael laughed lightly, remembering the picture. Once his father had taken him on a business trip. Officials were meeting in a rest house near Moscow. They were discussing something. Michael didn't try to find out that they wouldn't let him into the conference room anyway. He was off wandering in the spring woods. But when Rick stuttered about fishing, the organizers of the event immediately rushed to organize everything. And within an hour, you could see this sight. Rick standing in a small pool with a straw hat on his father's head and a fishing rod in his hands. Classic fisherman. The water in the pool is up to his ankles. You can't even see the water. It's all fish. Fish in the pool poured so much that legs and hands grab all around splashes in the shimmering silver scales. Michael noticed the confident mom tears on her cheeks and, without telling his wife, approached, leaned in himself. Kathy, what's wrong? Nothing. She wiped her eyes hastily. It's all over now. Well, Bereznoy stroked her hand with affectionate fingers. Our everything with Adriana. And not wanting to explain, she hastily turned the conversation. I'm very afraid for you. Why are you taking an airplane? I'm so afraid of flying. She always foresaw the bad. The black pessimist was talking about himself even now. Isn't it scary to take such a risk? That it's a good thing. Greece and Adriana have never been abroad, but if something happens, I'll lose everything. I have nothing left to live for. Michael's parents have one too. Don't worry, nothing will happen to us in the sky. I know that. The sky won't hurt us. Michael looked into her eyes, and though she still felt no tenderness for him, there was something in his gaze that was so understanding and compassionate. The strength of these feelings seemed out of place. Kathy smiled involuntarily at him in her years at the school. She hadn't met children like this. How clear-eyed and boyish, she thought. God forbid. No, God save him and Adriana. Kathy pushed her plate away. She wasn't good at sitting for hours. Pulling the cocktail away out of habit, ate quickly, like a person who made every minute count. Kelly's morning was getting better. I'm gonna kill that hairdresser. It's not like it's going smoothly for me, she complained. Running over to Adriana and looking in the mirror at her unfortunate hairstyle. Adriana was nervous because the lights were out in the morning and her mom couldn't iron her dress. Kelly offered her services. I stuck a screwdriver in the brush. I'm at home fixing things. And then she got electrocuted. Thank God it wasn't severe. But Kelly believed in omens and went pale. Oh, Adriana, something's gonna happen today. You're gonna get a tongue lashing. And just seeing beautiful young people, friends Michael Yakovenko amused. And soon the lens rang with her laughter. And you didn't invite Ethan? She asked, quietly. Why? I'm not a sadist, and he's not a masochist. No, you couldn't bring Ethan here and make him share in their fun. We can set the tea, serve the sweets. The waitress did not approach Christina, but Rick. She was experienced and unmistakably figured out the main person at the wedding. Rick glanced at his watch. Wow, a cab will be here for the guys in half an hour. Serve, of course. Let them at least try the cake. The cake was ordered several stories high. If it was a gangster movie, the lid would be off and a guy with a machine gun would pop out, whispered Michael. Adriana giggled, and Kelly businesslike looked at the cake and said we'll have to take everything that the guests will not eat. Take it home. Little by little it was getting dusk. The silhouettes of trees, the stars in the sky had lit up with small sparks. They waited, listening to the noises of the cab engine. The young ones were flying to Athens and traveling further in Greece. That's a good tone, the EC said. It used to be the way things were done. Church in the morning, restaurant in the evening, and then the train to the honeymoon. Don't worry, Adriana. Your mother and your friend will be delivered safely home, Rick said. I'll call you as soon as you get on the plane and when you arrive, my mom asked, and how she didn't want to hide it. But Adriana felt both her anxiety and her pain. I will. Michael threw his jacket over his shoulders. Into the car now. She resisted, but she didn't take off her jacket. It seemed to her that she was embraced by warm hands, and a moment later a bell rang in her pocket. Adriana remembered that she hadn't picked up her cell phone all day, and the tap was still glowing blue. A text message for the rest of her life, Ethan wrote. On the airplane, Faith had a strange feeling like they were flying to another planet. She didn't know English at all. She had learned German at school. Michael spoke English, even without an accent. Special schools and a musical ear. Plus he traveled abroad with his parents almost every year. And now in the kingdom state of Greece, Adriana would have to cling to him like a deaf mute. Their independent life was beginning. Michael gave Adriana a seat by the porthole. He strapped her in himself. And she'd never been able to do that, even in the car. She'd never been able to do it. Even in the car, the belt wouldn't tighten. It wouldn't tighten. She had untalented hands. The plane started to taxi onto the runway. It's not that yet. It's slow, not scary, Adriana thought. The airplane shuddered and began to accelerate. Michael and Vera's fingers intertwined. "Are you afraid?" Michael asked. She was silent, but from her eyes glistening and wide open, he realized that she was terribly afraid. He leaned toward her. She felt his breath on her cheek. "Don't be afraid. Nothing will happen to me in the air. I know it. I can feel it. Don't be afraid to fly with me." But the airplane lifted upward, and Adriana jerked away from the porthole, pressed herself against Michael, and was no longer aware of being lifted by the unknown force of the engines, or its Michael hugging her. And they took off. Michael knew from experience that pilots gained altitude in different ways. Some lead the car as if they were climbing a mountainside, others as if they were jumping nonstop. Michael liked a continuous takeoff, and right now the car was going that way. The hour was late, and most of the passengers were trying to sleep. But Michael, like all nervous people, could not sleep on the road. He was glad he did. And believe, I didn't. Why don't we have some champagne or cognac so you don't get scared? No, I don't want to. I'm drunk enough as it is. Wait, I have a present for you. I wanted to give it to you this morning. Michael took something shiny out of his pocket and put it on her arm. Quietly, the rings quivered. Adriana did not look at it immediately, almost fearfully, expecting to see expensive stones. But when she opened her eyes, she saw the bracelet was quite simple. Copper rings, some metals, a glass, white, and a flower. "It's Adriana," bent over myopically. "I found this. I bought it at a junkyard. Look at all of Exupery's little prints." And she saw on one of the medals and displaced the figure of a boy in a long cloak. "There's the rose, and the little brass lantern, and stars that laugh like Cubans, and a bronze 2-engine airplane. It will seem to you as if I were dying. But I'm not. My body is too heavy. I can't carry it. But it's like shedding an old shell. There's nothing sad about it," Michael said, humming as he always quoted memorized lines. And then he added, "You know, they found him, didn't they?" "Who?" asked Adriana, ready to cry. Everyone thought he'd been shot down by a German pilot. But recently fishermen found his bracelet. And then they found the wreckage of his plane at the bottom of the sea. But he was shot down. I think it was him who sent the car to the sea. I remember our Grinia, and for him, and for the soldiers of the GC flight, was a miracle. They thought that pilots were like birds. And then came the heavy machines with a lot of instruments. Gone was the imagination, the dream of poetry, and Exupery. He was sick. His back kept him from flying. Rumors were spread about him. Everything was so painful, so dirty, even his favorite things. Talking about him, I think he just decided to disappear. Don't cry. Better shake your hand and listen to the stars laughing." Adriana shook the brush lightly and heard a gentle, slightly audible, and the tinkling of crystal stars and tambourine. They tinkled, making contact with each other and hitting the bronze airplane, as if flying between them. They were sitting in a small tavern. "That's right. How does it sound?" Adriana said. "I thought it was purely pirate. From the last century, anyway. A place where drunken sailors congregate." "Not at all," Michael laughed. "In Greece, a tavern is a commonplace. If you look in and see that the tables and chairs are simple, like in village houses, and all the furnishings are the same. That's exactly right. Greeks love them for hours. The most famous people sit here, and they come here all the time. Take a look around. Maybe there's a minister or an artist next to you. That's the kind of democracy they have. Or better yet, you have a menu and choose what you want to eat." "Yeah, I'm gonna get it." Translate. "Come on," Adriana asked. "I can't even pronounce what it says." Here Michael poked his finger into the lines with a name like that. "We just can't miss the lemon soup cat." Adriana couldn't take it anymore and laughed. "I want that lemon soup cat. We're ordering cat soup." And we'll also get the Variglico, this strong, sweet coffee and sun, young wine infused with smelly conifers. They sat and ate this fabulous soup, which turned out not to be of mustachioed striped at all, but rice with lemon, with juice. They ate fish fried in olive oil. In small sips they drank hot, really very sweet, and some kind of thick coffee. Before tasting something, Adriana sighed at the smell. There was nothing to compare it to. It seemed to her that the Greek gods ate exactly what they were eating now. She touched the rough yellow and green checkered curtains with her fingers, and their table stood by the window and couldn't believe it was all really happening. And from now on she and Michael would be together. The world opened up to her. And it was so simple. None of those non-young Greeks sitting next to them were surprised that she was here. She had seen nothing but the outskirts of her hometown and had no hope of seeing anything else in her life. They paid and went outside. Without conspiring, they turned and walked toward the two-story and golden-colored hotel building. Again their hands intertwined and they laughed. "There's the meteor," Michael said. The cab driver, hearing the familiar word, nodded. "I wondered why you chose this hot country. I only know meteorites, and this is the second place. There's no place like this on Earth." "Where?" A convulsive sigh, and Adriana made a hasty hand gesture. "Exactly," asked the driver to stop after seeing the meteor. "You still have to come to your senses." Home had always meant a lot to Faith, its protection, its warmth, its four walls and silence. No extraneous sounds, no other people's gazes. What she saw now were also homes, but God's homes create a monastery. Floating in the air, only God could. Islets of paradise for people to see how it was. Responsible rocks many 1 million years old from the creation of the world. Adriana decided for herself. Michael said that once there was a sea here with a communist bottom. As time passed and the sea receded, water, wind, and temperature changes turned its bottom into pillars of stone, as if suspended in the air. They really scorched these pillars, and the Greeks called them meteors. To the cliff tops began to climb those who sought solitude, hermits. They found caves, or just shallow cracks in the rocks here to pass the nights, or maybe days. They probably slept during the day and prayed at night, when the stars are as close as if they were touching their heads. When you are alone with the sky, what shocked Adriana the most was the monastery, street barbers. It seemed to her the most flying, unweighted finger pointing them into the sky. They passed over a narrow bridge. Adriana tried not to look down. There were chasms to the right and left, and small, cozier courtyards inside the monastery, where ancient walls and steps neighbor with flowery towns. Everywhere, it is a special morning frequency, which happens only in Orthodox monasteries and temples. In the center of the courtyard, beds in the shape of a cross, densely planted with flowers. You look, the cross is blooming. Later they will buy souvenirs, and what not only will not pick up relatives and friends, bags of herbs and bottles, with fragrant oils, ground and coffee, and Greek wine in empty bottles, painted clay vases, scarves, beads, statuettes, but about themselves will bring only 2 Tarot crosses. Michael will choose the golden carved one. It is permeated with air. Adriana will choose a golden one with birch inclusions, as if with splashes of sky. And it will turn out that they didn't choose them for themselves, but for each other. And they would exchange crosses, never to take them off again. They spent the rest of their vacation in Crete at Nicholas in the Gulf of Mirabella. There was quite a bit of Byzantine antiquity here too. The Church of St. Nicholas with frescoes from that era. St. Nicholas. Legend has it that Athena herself took a bath in this lake. "I'll never forget it," said Adriana. "Let's travel a lot with you. Every year we'll go to some new country. I also want to go to Norway. The fjords, Andersen green ice, and old trolls." The sea was calm, and the silver moon globe hung just above the water. Adriana couldn't stand it and followed the moon's path straight into the deep. A few moments later, Michael caught up with her. As the water began to nod their hips, they stopped. They stood in the moon's glow, Now, that's not going to happen anymore, Michael said quietly. What? Those seas? It will all be a thing of the past, an ocean of storms, a sea of rain, a sea of clarity, a sea of calm, a sea of fertility, and a sea of crisis. He was listing names, almost sang. They're right, my loved ones. They're right. You can't live in two worlds. Did you know that the moon's seas and the Earth's oceans are alike? They're the same depth. They have basalt bottoms, but our oceans are alive. Those worlds only come to life in the imagination. Enough. One must become a citizen of the Earth. He laughed softly, but it was a strange laugh. What are you up to? Anxious? Adriana asked. You won't be able to do without all this. Are you going to die with you? He laughed and drew her to him. Never with you. We are exiled, thought Adriana. After returning from Greece, they moved in with Michael, taking 2 rooms in the left wing of the house, the furthest away from everyone, with a private garden. Adriana was afraid to go out to dinner, too restrained. She felt herself at a table with a small tablecloth and numerous devices, where the servants served her. And most importantly, Michael's parents were nearby. And yet she walked. Rick was not always present at the table. Christina was emphatically silent. And if she spoke, it was to Michael. There was an unforgivable resentment in his voice. She wouldn't let the young people forget their guilt. They breathed it. Michael received a gold medal at graduation and entered the university law school in the summer. Adriana, on the other hand, didn't get a few points in PhilFac. Where else to go? There was nothing else to do. Please be with me, Michael. Please be with me, so that you're always here for me. Stupid. Kathy had a hard time holding back. Idiot. You realize you're going to be nothing. This family will throw you out sooner or later. And then what? A mop in your hands and scrub the floors. You're totally dependent on them. But Adriana felt that Michael had a string tugging at his heartstrings, and she knew that she was the one who couldn't hurt him. She couldn't contradict him. You have to do what he wants, what's best for him. So where did your friend go? I asked Michael when they were alone together. She persisted in not naming Adriana and her wife. Does she have to? Michael asked. Behind the softness of his tone, she sensed the challenge and accepted it. So her ability to do anything was not enough. Or did she just decide to live like a rich lady? She knows you won't mind. You'll put her up. And lying in bed all day painting her nails is certainly easier than going out and studying. She heard Michael's labored sigh. There were suppressed, unspoken words in it. Then the sun turned abruptly and left the room. Adriana tried not to show her face anywhere but her part of the house. It was getting dark. Michael and Adriana sit by the fireplace with no lights on. The wood has already burned through and the room is warm. Michael stirs the coals. They drink as rubies shimmer with fire. They don't give up. They don't crumble to ash. They live. Adriana pours wine into heavy crystal glasses and sits down on the rug next to her husband. The wine, too, is ruby-colored and smells of grapes. They say nothing. They stare at the catching-up embers. Adriana no longer asks Michael to tell stories. Now she tries to talk herself, to distract him from his sad reverie, perhaps the reason for his longing. It's just that late fall is raining. Next summer, you and I will go to India, she says. Michael's eyes travel down her arm. Should we? He asks. Do I still respond weakly? Not quite yet. It's hot. Someone told me that when you step off the airplane, it's like being in a frying pan. It's hard to breathe in the heat. I didn't know why I wanted to go there, says Adriana, resting her chin on her palms. I heard it too. Poverty, slums, filth. And then I heard someone else's story too. I don't remember, but no. I remember my mom's student. He decided to search for the meaning of life. Can you imagine? He was just an ordinary boy, chubby and square. I called him by his soul. He was a teacher. My mom told me about his internship with her. The kids wouldn't listen to him. They'd run after him in class. My mom kept them busy. And this man began to search for the meaning of life, read various philosophical works. He went to India and came back completely different. And he came back completely different. And they say there was a man like him. Shocked, he told me. He and his friends were traveling by car, and at some point the road divides into 3 identical paths. Then they learned that one leads to a waterfall, another to a village, and the third to a temple. But at that moment they had no one to ask where to go. They see an old man in a white robe coming. The thief had no time to open his mouth. The old man raised his staff and showed them the way, the path to the temple. They went there without a word, without a question. There they read minds, there they feel people, there even doctors determine the disease by the policy, by the heartbeat. "Let's go," Michael said and smiled. He hadn't smiled in a long time. "Right? Well, let the pan stand." I also read that the shops there sell stones with stars inside. That's what they're called. Stars, and sapphire ruby points a beam of light at the stone, and a star lights up in it. Michael leaned slightly on Faith's shoulder and stood up, placing the glass on the table. "Don't wait up for me when you go to sleep tonight. I've got a lot of laws to deal with." He nodded at the table where the textbooks were divided up. This is how Adriana remembered those evenings. She lies there with her face turned toward the table lamp, and feeling the warmth from it, she opens her eyes. She sees Michael bent over his books, his eyebrows shifted, and a thin, deep wrinkle crosses his forehead. Adriana, it seems that he is walking in the desert against the wind, and it is painful to him, this effort. In the last year of Michael's studies, he was interning at his father's place. Driving up in the morning to the government building, which in every regional center is called the White House, Michael was not in awe of his skyrocketing career, and even less did he feel reverence for the ranks. The governor had only recently been appointed and was in the process of selecting his cronies. As Adriana Michael explained, he felt like he was in a theater. All this bureaucratic fraternity smugly unashamed of anyone in the world. How dedicated they looked when he was scolding his subordinates. But what was behind it? Later, Michael heard the head of the press service say, "Good thing I got my paycheck. Holy shit. I wouldn't have lasted a day for the idea." But she was the one who liked to spread it thin the most. After her whipping, the girls' fingers were shaking, and the room smelled of Corvalol. They were afraid of losing such a lucrative job, but they didn't want to be considered human. And the humanity that had not yet died in them protested. Older officials had learned not to take anything personally. Michael had been present at meetings where fluff and feathers flew, but the boardroom door slammed, and the officials went back to being nonchalant and casual, as if nothing had happened. Michael was getting lost in the endless intrigue. The other day, he stood at the window with white-haired Cindy, one of those few girls you can talk to. Cindy was married and did not make a pass at him like the other ladies to whom Michael's marital status meant nothing. It was assumed that with his looks, cheating on his wife was a matter of course. "I've just been appointed head of the department," Cindy shared bitterly, "so I complained about how hard it was to settle in." So he sat down with the same feet to the boss and said that he was ready to replace me. Cindy confessed that the position wasn't hers. She wants to leave. She can't cope. Before teasing, she and summarized in general, "Enema, and know your place. Everybody's sucking up to everybody, or feel that they're about to be deposed. Try to get as fast as possible." All this was covered with lofty phrases about the people's good, and they were unrealistically polite. These people, Michael heard them talking all the time. Let's put it in a streamlined way. It seemed to him, approached the officials with a dog, a bloodhound. It wouldn't have honored the human scent coming from them. Michael was getting stuffy. The White House had a beautiful dining room with a conservatory. Everything in the world was served there, nothing more to be desired. Especially good were the cakes, the bird's milk. But Michael would call Adriana and get her to go out for lunch. While waiting for his wife, he paced back and forth in the small park in front of the White House. There were fountains running here. Tight jets made the water boil, stirred to the bottom. Michael stopped, putting his hands behind his back. Tall, thin, it was easier for him to breathe. A child in a red jumpsuit leaned over the edge, looked at the foamy white water, and asked Daddy, "Are there fish in here?" Michael could see Adriana from afar. Here she was jumping off the streetcar, rushing towards him, the hem of her golden-colored cloak flying away. "Like you." Their voices merged, and longing gave way to laughter. Next door, there was an alternate. They stood in line with everyone else. Watching the dumplings boil, the cook stirred them for the pilgrims in a huge pot. Then she would pick up a colander. Already, the line was beginning to move quickly. She and Adriana already had their own table in the corner. Faith's hand warmed Michael's hair. The pain lodged in the right sand receded under the gentle movements, her fingers from the dumplings and steam rising. "Where do you want to go tonight?" Adriana asks, and quickly adds, "Let's just go for a walk." Walking in this weather. She nods. She loves the weather and life in general. He has less and less of that love of life. He remembers that he felt her as a child and himself as an adult. How silly is that? She is the one who takes his hand and leads him in the city park of Clueless. November. Only a few dark green bushes still held their shape after being trimmed and stood like abandoned fairy tale animals. The rest of the trees and shrubs had long since flown over the bare, wet park. Beyond the granite parapet, the Volga beach, not a single person. A fine rain dripped cold water. They walked, holding hands. Their fingers were cold too, and only somewhere in the depths of their palms touched, and there was still warmth. Adriana again. With no musical or artistic talent, I began to describe what was around me. But what else was there to manage to notice? "Look, there are leaves left on that tree over there. Look closely. They're completely silver. And how does the light of the streetlights reflect in the wet asphalt? The ground is on fire. Red and blue gold. We walk on the solid, and the glow crushes and shimmers the colors." Michael put his palm on his chest under his jacket. "No, it's stuffy," and asked me to keep it down. Once, when they were walking, it snowed, falling in large flakes at once. It made the world seem childlike and fairy tale-like. It was so beautiful that they looked at each other and laughed. "Up, up, up, up. Look up," Adriana shouted. They threw their heads back and watched as countless snowflakes were born out of the unknown darkness, and they flew at them endlessly. Michael squeezed Adriana in his arms, and they all looked up, and their heads were spinning, because the whirlwind was not just descending on them, it was taking them with it. They didn't feel like they were standing on the ground anymore. Adriana sat in the barbershop. She always went to this little barbershop, where there were only two masters, and there were almost never any queues. And then there was still time left until the evening. Adriana decided to run into the cafe next door. Then it would be possible to avoid a formal dinner. At home, she took a cup of coffee and a piece of apple pie smelling of cinnamon. The filling was Kissling, probably Antonovka. Barely had time to settle in at the table and shake off the drops of standing snow from the furry lapel in my jacket as I slipped into my bags. Lightly vibrating her cell phone, she began rummaging through the compartments, never able to immediately find it. Adriana. She barely recognized the voice. Kelly. It wasn't her voice. Thin, childish, pathetic. "What's wrong?" Adriana assumed anything. The mother-in-law lost money. The pipes burst at home, and there was a flood. Eventually, Christina was fired for some theatrical intrigue, but she was told by the impossible, unthinkable Adriana. Michael was gone. Michael was gone. Adriana didn't realize she could grab her face, and in a voice as thin as Kelly's, "Kelly, scream, scream, scream," not realizing that the heads of everyone sitting in the cafe had turned toward her, that she had dropped her phone, and it was under her feet falling apart. She screamed, clenching her cheeks with her palms. "No." In a flurry, she knotted her hands and screamed no again. And then her hands were suddenly numb. Her heart is pounding and her hands are not us. Adriana can't lean on the table to stand up, and she can't cry because she can't breathe. Breathing is all confused and convulsive. Coffee is dripping all over the table. This Adriana does reach out a dead hand to grab the edge of the table and stand up, knocking over the cup. And next came the memory lapse. The house was surrounded by other people's cars. Christina, standing dry in the hallway, a certain straight woman in a black dress, arms cordoned off. It's not Michael in mourning yet, it's her favorite dress. Then they're in some very small room. It's unbearably stuffy. Adriana can't sit down. She circles the room. There she sits. Kelly. Her face is gone. What's wrong? Finally, Adriana asks. He drove up to the institute. A fellow student saw it. A car was coming. Not sure if he was drunk, but still he parked it so as not to hit anyone. When they ran up, he was lying on the steering wheel, dropped his face on his hand. They say he was very white. They say it wasn't clear if he was breathing or not. The ambulance came quickly, about 10 minutes. They tried to do something, but they said it was too late, too late. They took him away without his life. Yes, but what's wrong with him? But from what? What's the heart from? Adriana, it's my fault. I'm the one who grabbed my head. I went and asked for a waiver so your family wouldn't exist, and now she's gone. Lightning struck. Adriana looked at the clock and saw that the time was approaching 6:00 p.m. This was the time Michael always came in. Adriana realized she was waiting for him. He must come. Adriana realized that she was going crazy. She must be taken away. She's insane, said Christina to one of the ladies she knew. Adriana sat by the coffin. The coffin was in the largest room of the house, the one she and Michael had recently called the sick room. Sitting there were those closest to Rick, Christina, a few elderly men and women. As it turned out, they're relatives, but there were a lot of people in the room. Adriana could feel their presence, their breathing, but saw no one except Michael. Michael's face was indeed very white now. To say he was just sleeping. But he didn't look like sleeping. There was a distinct stamp of death on the huddled features. It was impossible to imagine him getting up and speaking. All of him was already there in the unknown. Belonged to him. Voices came in waves. Such a boy. Pity his parents had him all to themselves. Such a pity. What about the heart? Is it getting younger these days? Heart attacks, strokes, and there was no warning. A young wife will survive. But the mother. And he has no children left. Adriana raised her head and grinned crookedly. Another phrase nailed her. And the wife. Look, no tears. A few days later, as she was packing up her things in her and Michael's former. And now in no one's room she heard a radio a woman's voice saying, "The land is empty without you." It was only then that she was able to drop her head on the table and sob. So the body was in denial. And she knows why he left. He was strangled by the stranglehold of everyday life. He condemned himself to it. He couldn't take it for her. And she realized it so late. Adriana left the room, hanging on her shoulder the same backpack that had accompanied her to Meteor an eternity ago. What was she to take with her? But she knew everything she needed. She did carry. Rick not being at work somehow mattered little in their lives. Rick. He was almost never there. Showed up at the table, smiled, said nice things. And he was the one who chose the road to Michael's demise. Didn't feel sorry for his son. Didn't let him go. And seemingly unbending. Turned out to be more merciful. How could she not want to see her son on stage? She let him go. Go on, you'd better dance. Christina stood at the foot of the stairs, knew Adriana was coming down, but had not yet heard her footsteps. She was just a girl. Flowers, rock pants, hair in a ponytail. Turned away, stood there. But when she lifted her face, Adriana was struck by how her eyes were not just old, but ancient, all-leading ones that no longer feared anything. And there was in those eyes something of the look Michael was leaving. Asked her with a chesty whisper, though it was obvious. Adriana nodded. "You're going to your mom's, aren't you?" I said, "You'll be taken." Adriana had said right after the funeral, when she was able to speak coherently, that she was going back to her mother's house, and let them talk to her for God's sake, not about her inheritance, but about what she was entitled to. "I don't even want to know. I will live as I have always lived," she said then and now, seeing her former daughter-in-law off. Kelly couldn't help herself. She said almost against her will, "Try to get over it. Let it go. You'll be happy when you meet someone else." Faith's lips quivered. Kelly didn't realize the quick spasm running down her face. "Wait." Here Christina walked quickly to the dressing table, opened the jewelry box, sifted just as quickly with her slender fingers gawked or jewelry from one to another. About the ring, heavy, expensive. A white stone from the crisis sharp, probably a diamond. "Be that as it may, pray for Michael." "Don't." Adriana shook her head, pulled it away. "Adriana, here is his cross always with me. Don't need anything else." And for the way the gaze greedily pulled Kelly at what she had chosen, held in her son's hands, for feeling the same fierce longing in her as she did in herself. Adriana had forgiven her for a lot of things. Nothing had changed in Adriana's small room. It hums with different voices, a car tractor parked under the window. The narrow bed is bedded on an old quilt pink still grandmother's. In the dark water of the aquarium swim goldfish. "My, you are good." Adriana lies on the bed and Mom strokes her face. Her hair comes to life. "Mom, I'm pregnant, aren't I?" "Colorless," Adriana says. "Jesus Christ." Mom raises her hand. "You're lying to me now." Adriana shook her head. "I've been to the doctor 12 weeks, and they know." "You didn't need to explain who they were." "Michael's family." "No, and God forbid they should find out." "But why? Don't you understand?" "Because that would mean losing the last thing I have." They had nothing left either. Michael was alone. "So they're gonna take me and lock me in the house, and I can't be there a minute longer. I can't see it all. And then they'll take my son. He won't be mine. They'll raise him their way. They'll decide everything for him. They'll kill them. Like Michael did." The mother is silent. "Isn't that what you wanted?" Adriana asked, hearing her thoughts. "You always told me we'd grow up, but you can't imagine what I can't imagine." Adriana sat up on the bed, her face swollen. "You see, if I just mention it to them, do you know what could be?" Mother asked. "They might not believe it's his kid. They'll say you need money." "You what?" "I know they didn't love me, but how could they think that? You don't know people. Maybe they'll do the opposite, help you raise you. That would be good, because no one will come to your maternity hospital but me. There will be days when this child may have nothing to feed, nothing to wear. We have to leave," Adriana said, without listening to her. "If anyone tells them, if they meet me in the street with the baby, I won't survive if they take it away. We have to leave. Where you want to go, I don't know, but I imagine if I'm walking with my son somewhere and I run into Kelly, not just leave, and you would come with me. Where would I go without you?" Just answered Mom. Kelly came to the rescue. Kelly, it turns out, had a relative in Gelendzhik who dealt in real estate. He found housing for vacationers, selected options for those wishing to move. He responded to the call immediately and said that within a week or two he would be able to offer them something. But the case was delayed, mainly because of them to prepare the documents and find buyers for their apartment overlooking the dump. It wasn't that easy. Finally, things were working out. They were selling the apartment cheap, but the one that Kelly's sibling had picked up. Kelly's sibling had enough money. Kelly was helping to set up. She was very worried about Adriana hurting herself, and she was small and fragile. She took heavy knots, moved things around. Kelly's dream came true. She graduated from medical school with a red diploma and worked in a sanatorium Sosnovy Bor. She did physical therapy with the vacationers. She hadn't changed at all. Her pink baby face was still fresh. Kelly was like a memory of childhood, of that time when it is always easy on the soul. I'll come and visit you, and you'll be sure to ask me to be your godparent. Where is Ethan? Adriana asked. I haven't seen him for a long time. How did things work out for him? You don't know. And felt me from the invisible barrier, quickly looking for words to say coherently, to believe. Ethan failed. Then I went to the institute and got drafted into the army. And Adriana was up so fast that I didn't have time to prove my obstacle. And somewhere in Chechnya. And since then, Adriana, I really don't know anything. Adriana, don't cry. It's not good for you. Please, Adriana. Mom bloomed instead of a hive of high-rises, a stone house with a big garden. Mommy fries fish. She puts a huge pan on the table with chunks of flounder crispy crusts on her cheeks, and she's so animated in movement and speech it's like she's lost 20 years. Finally, the hour came. The hospital was close by in this small town, and they didn't call an ambulance. They walked. And when Adriana knocked on the emergency room door, and as soon as the sun came up, a boy was born. He cried softly, as if he hadn't cried at all. He was talking, soothing his mother in his own voice. I can feel her fear for him. That mommy didn't scream at all, the midwife said, gray and bossy. That's the way we'd all have a baby. He's a good-looking boy, too. It's rare to see such a handsome one. He's a prince. I heard your husband died. He left. Adriana wanted to answer, because for her it was like that. Michael had gone to his worlds, and no one else could prevent him. But it was easier to nod than to explain it all. Look, don't name it after him then. The midwife said, it's bad luck for the child to have a happy fate. Picking up another name for him, Adriana took her eyes away, staring. There was a full moon out the window now. The Bay of Rainbows. She repeated Ocean of Storms, but through these names she saw the lifelessness of the lunar landscapes. She decided to name her son Sam, and Mom was already asking in her notes, how is our Sam? Mom was the only one who came to see Adriana. Colorful balloons tied to the fence, Kelly and the dads going into the trees with binoculars. None of this was for her and her son. Despite the best efforts of his mother and grandmother, Sam was growing up, weak and almost ceaselessly sick. There was no childhood illness that would pass him by. Maybe another mother would have taken it more calmly and waved goodbye to outgrow it. But Adriana lived in constant fear, frozen. Would the last thing Michael had left be taken from her? Adriana, you're crazy. You bastard, look at yourself in the mirror. What have you become like? Kathy was angry. You don't look like a shadow in the mirror anymore. Adriana had really lost a lot of weight. There were blue shadows under her eyes. She forgot to eat because she was tired and didn't want to. She has snickered over these months obediently, uncomplainingly, like an automaton doing her homework. Mom would stand on the threshold of the bathroom, watching, shaking her head at the laundry grinder, a decrepit machine. Adriana bent over the tub. Sharp elbows snicker and puffs of steam. Believe wonders at Sam's voice. She fucks off the hand foam running to see if the baby is calling her. She wanted to hold her son's hand all the time. But when Sam turned a year old, she had to go to work. There was a job as a clerk in a bookstore. And Adriana was hired, although she had no experience, but she was diligently unrequited, even if one of the customers was cranky or rude. In addition, she read a lot and could suggest something, showed the shelf where the right books stood. She paid attention to the novelties. The salary was small, but at least it was regular money. Kathy retired and now sat with her grandson. Sam grew up not a garden boy in the mornings when young mothers walked by their house with all the children waddling obediently behind their backs. Sam sat on the table and gazed at this picture out the window. He had a look of sympathy written on his face, and his grandmother was tying his shoelaces, skinny and pale, with a perpetually hung throat. Was he so much like Michael in features and appearance that it made your heart ache? Grandma used to make him semolina, but he didn't want it. It was depressing to eat. He moved his spoon around the plate and wrinkled his nose at the smell of hot milk. Adriana took specially prepared nuts and raisins and began to lay out a simple mosaic of nutty bunnies with raisins on the porridge. Son, Sam would take up the spoon until he awakened from his fantasy, and he was bored with everything. Their neighbor was Miranda, a corner, ugly girl of about 27, plasterer on the construction site with her own hands over the dilapidated house, only for the hardest jobs they called men. Two Alkas, who quickly dragged something to her, broke off the pricks at night to sit at the table as soon as possible. Miranda made herself cozy to make everything like people. She came over, consulted. What wallpaper to choose, paint. She was used to everyone being interested. She couldn't understand Adriana's indifference to everyday life. Yes, mother, do you even live like a refugee? She says, looking around. And the shabby furniture and the owner's meager closet. Adriana shrugged weakly. But Miranda was a kind soul. She carried something to treat. A bucket of apples, a plate. Blinov eagerly played with Sam. Miranda was eager to get married. Every man who paid attention to her, she was ready to wash his feet and drink water. She'd cry on his shoulder. When another romance went sour, you've been without a man and nothing. She'd tell Miranda to blow her nose loudly. And I'll have a baby somehow, like me. I don't have to. One time, Miranda came running in excitement. And I met him. You have no idea who he is. Well, who is he? Adriana asked with an involuntary smile, wiping the plates. He works with dolphins. We went to the dolphinarium yesterday with the girls. It turned out that yesterday they were walking along the promenade in a small group, and just then they called for a performance. That's how it happens. For 100 years you live in the city and do not notice that you have dolphins in your neighborhood, and the girls are performing so beautifully. Their uniforms are like military pianists, and the dolphins obey them, jump through the hoop, and do all sorts of things. And then in the echelon, even from the last row, Miranda saw that the man was tall and slender. Such a face, and what his dolphins were doing, except that they didn't talk. They understood him half a word. And when after the show people were offered to take pictures with the flash operas, Miranda hurried downstairs, one of the first people to be let into the pool one by one. When her turn came, Miranda was able to get a glimpse of his god dolphins. There you have to rinse your hands with seawater so the dolphin doesn't get sick, or something doesn't get infected from people. And there he is standing, dolphin. What a dolphin this guy is standing. And when he took my hand, you know, there's men like that. They just touch you, and it's over. And how did that end? You met him at Adriana. That was fun. Well, I said I liked it so much. I liked it so much. I'll come back tomorrow. He said, come. By the way, you shouldn't take me to the bench. It's fun. After Miranda left, Adriana got to thinking. She read dolphins, curing people's children. Why not? At least try to negotiate. Pay her to let her socialize with this marine wonder. Maybe it would help. She went to the dolphinarium in the morning when there was no show. Timidly, she pushed the iron gate, painted blue. The first person she encountered was a girl in shorts or a scarlet t-shirt, blonde hair tied carelessly at the back of her head. The girl was carrying a bucket of fish, and she looked sternly at Adriana. Probably sick of vacationers trying to get their way with their pets. The story about the sick boy had softened her somewhat. Come over there and talk. She pointed to the edge of the big pool. See, there's a man sitting over there, if he'll let you. We've never had one of those before. Adriana approached silently. The man sat with his back to her. He was wearing a black suit. He was looking through a file folder. All she could see was the back of his head. Ah, blonde. Excuse me, she called out. He turned around. For a while they stared at each other. He saw a woman not young, but a heavy-set figure, hair, short waves. You ask, a deep crease between her eyebrows. The dress below the knees is very plainly made. You can see that long ago waved her hand at the fashion of a puffy shawl on her shoulders bathed in it from the sea. The breeze is fresh. Then something changed in his face, and he recognized Adriana. Was she uncertain? Asked Ethan. She too was not immediately able to recognize in this man in whom nothing of the boyishness of her classmate remained, the other quite different. The stare was stark and even heavy in his shoulders, and more gray in his hair than she had in one movement. He stood looking at her and remained silent. "Did you come to me?" Finally, he asked. "Did you find me?" She shook her head. "Kelly, she told me a long time ago that you were dead." He touched his temple, covered his eyes. So all these years she'd thought of him as dead. Where did that fool Williams come from? Did she tell you about Chechnya? I just got shot. It's a common thing. I was in the hospital for a long time, almost a year. My mother left everything. She came to nurse me back to health. She's waddling around with a stick. And then we moved here. It's the right climate. And I found some relatives. And you, he corrected himself. You and Michael vacation here. Why do you need me? I buried Michael, she said simply. And my son is sick. They say dolphins can heal. They can. For a few minutes, he looked away. She tried to catch his gaze, whether he would allow it or deny it. She thought he was hesitating, and he just couldn't manage his face. But when he turned back to her again, his expression was calm. What are we talking about? Bring her in, he said. Even probably will help. Maybe you too, because you don't look so good either. And she was silent, and for the first time in a long time she spoke sincerely. No, Ethan, I haven't wanted to live for a long time. I'd like to raise Sam somehow, he answered. Not at once. We used to think differently, he said. When someone died, it was like being on an airplane. I'd see a paratrooper being dropped. One went in, the other got a tap on the shoulder. Are you next? None of us are staying here. We're all next. So live those 3 seconds like a human being. And he added, wait, you're coming with me now. She got her file back with a bucket full of fish and beckoned her, brought her to the edge of the pool. Come on, stand over here. Adriana saw there in the depths vertically stands a dolphin and looks at her from his dolphin, its blue dimension. Hold out your hand. That's it. Ethan took her hand. She felt the rough and hardness of his palm. A moment later, Dolphin leaped into the air, and she felt the instant touch of his nose. She ought look, but that's gentler than a horse's lips. That's a good for you, Barney. That's a good one. Ethan crouched at the edge of the pool with a fish in his hands. The dolphin poked its head out, and it looked like a baby. It had a completely childish smile. She smiled back. They stood against each other, a sturdy floor and gray-haired man, and a small, slender boy. Hello, Ethan said. Hello, tilted his head to get a better look at the person he was talking to. Sam replied politely. They studied each other. Ethan saw in the boy's eyes of faith to an inquisitive desire to understand each. The same pity. This little boy seemed to be looking at him with compassion too. What frightened him? The scar on his face. He was lucky in that fight. How many were killed? He realized then how easy it was to die. Suddenly, the fierce machine gun bursts from the right. You turn your head and see that your comrades are already there, a bloody stain on their chests. And the eyes are calm, not familiar. The battle is boiling, and the man is already walking along unknown roads. Some say all warriors go to heaven, others say they are damned. Losing friends, Ethan believed that there they would be met with covered grass and silence. From his first days in Chechnya, and still today, silence was what he wanted most. His legs were ragged from knee to fingertips, an automatic rifle clutched carelessly in his hand. He was a sniper, and in his mind one thought pleading. The silence of silence. The sea is silence. When Ethan got home, he thought nothing would help. His whole body ached in pills, but a handful gave no respite from the pain. Friends were sending mummies. They called her to all parts of the country. some to Altai, some to the Caucasus. You'll rest here." And then he hugged Delphin, just like Adriana, just like Sam did today. And he smiled at him from his childhood. Ethan cried. Then he learned that he wasn't the only one with tears flowing. Many of the people the dolphins began to heal could not hold back their sobs. And Adriana came as exhausted as he had ever been. She should just be taken by the hand and carried along as he led his boys out from under fire. Now it's her and that boy's turn. "What's up, brother? You can't scare big fish like that. I guess they don't bite," Sam said diplomatically. "I've read about them. Can I pet them? The water's warm, so take your clothes off, kid. They'll even take you for a ride." "What are you doing?" Adriana gasped. "He'll catch a cold." "He'll never catch a cold or drown. I'm watching him." Sam was so intoxicated he couldn't remember himself, and he squealed with delight. The little baby vest was firmly encrypted on him, and his new friend stayed close to him in the water. And most importantly, the dolphin's elastic vibrations of the water from his big body. And you could throw your arm around and hug this fabulous creature and glide along with him on the water surface. Adriana sat on the edge of the pool, dipping her hand into the water to check that it was really warm, then wiping away the tears that rolled uncontrollably down her cheeks. On the weekend, Ethan had invited her to swim to the rocks. Where was she dumbfounded? What a mother. "You've lived by the sea for so long without ever seeing it. I'll give you a tour." Adriana couldn't even imagine what her mother would say. Her daughter had decided to act like a girl again. And Adriana lied for the first time in her life. She lied. She said that this Sunday they made it a working day to rearrange the books. In the morning, the sea is clear as a tear, rested. "Well?" asked Ethan. He sat at the water's edge and watched Adriana walk towards him in a golden sundress. He couldn't believe it was her, that she was here. He brought everything he needed, stretched us a towel. Lying there were 2 pairs of swallows. The red ones bigger, the green ones smaller. Tube masks swam. She asked. It was a wild beach here, large rocks with sharp edges. Ethan took Adriana's hand above the elbow. He wouldn't let her fall, and it was definitely worth it for her to slip on the long, silt-covered seaweed. As Ethan's strong fingers and instant reaction brought her back to her balance, the water seemed cold, and Adriana hesitated for a second there. She asked, pointing to a distant rock, "And if I'm not overpowered, I haven't swam in 100 years. "Yes, you will swim," he said calmly. "You'll surprise yourself. Just don't panic. Give it to the water. The sea will carry you." Adriana put on the mask. The rubber eased tightly over her face. The tube stretched her lips unaccustomedly, but Ethan stood by her side. Adriana lowered herself onto the water, and it was as if she had been transported beyond an unknown frontier. Into another world, he was as real as the earthly one. But until a moment ago, it had not existed for her, and now she was part of it. And only in the audible strain of her breath sounded her amazement. Adriana poked her outstretched fingers into the rock, feeling the prickly shells and fluffy strands of seaweed beneath her hands. Ethan gestured for her to sit down. She sat down. Suddenly, her head was above water. Again, the crossing of the unknown boundary seemed overwhelming and the air cold. God, how far away the shore was. They sat in the middle of the sea, hair wet, wind lapping. She turned to Ethan even now, after the sea font with salt-shot hair. He seemed to her quite a boy, and she was the same washing by the sea with spontaneous strands of hair. It was as if that school time had returned. Ethan laughed. "What's up? The sharks didn't eat you. You must have made arrangements with them in advance." "You grumbled," she said. "I remember your talents. The sharks wouldn't have touched you," Adriana said, wiping her wet eyes. They sat on a rock in the middle of the sea and reminisced. It was almost completely calm, and only occasionally Adriana started in a succession of small waves at them, one a little higher than the others, and was rising to keep her head from rolling off. They remembered an old man nicknamed Terminator, owner of such a powerful bust that she could demolish everything in her path. "I've never seen women like that in my life," Ethan said, and they memorialized the school bully Charles in 3rd grade by breaking his leg. His teacher came to visit him, and while she was having tea with her mother, Charles managed to bury her glasses in a flower pot. Poor nearsighted Jenna. How did she get home? And the glasses stayed safely in the pot until spring, when her mother decided to replant the geraniums. They went back in their thoughts to exams and prom night, and they were kids again. Ethan suddenly said, "Adriana, nightmare. My eye slipped. I think I'm without one." "Calm down, only calm down," replied Ethan. Immortal phrase, bent down, looking into the water, and Adriana saw the deep scars and the ugliness in his back. Ethan dove in. A few seconds later, Adriana felt him put a loss on her leg. "What if he had drowned?" she asked. "Or the flippers?" he asked. "Don't drift." 2. "I could get you to shore sometime. You're only a short swim away." Wow, Adriana thought. The shore was drawing a thin line somewhere on the horizon. But Ethan had his own notions of easy and hard. He took his time climbing up the rock, just held his hand on the edge of it, and it appeared to be at his feet. "Adriana, you're not going anywhere else, are you?" Suddenly he asked. It was night, and the wind was whipping Adriana's glass, clusters of lilac blossoms. And from those flowers, Ethan knocked. Adriana opened up. Adriana knew it was only a step and a lift of the hook on the door. One move, and there would be Ethan. And her future with him, because he wouldn't let her go anywhere. She even felt like Michael would want to hand her over to Ethan, to be safe for her there. She stood and did not look toward the window. The puffy handkerchief had a warmth coming from it. She hugged herself like a little girl. "Tonight my star will be just above the place where I fell a year ago. I'm going home. You see, it's very far away. My body is too heavy. I can't carry it." She felt a breath against her cheek and the nudge of a finger against her back. Michael, his presence was so palpable that she was afraid to turn her head. He pushed her toward Ethan, and now she was already throwing back on the hook. Michael lived as if barely touching the ground, like his mother's point shoes, all directed toward the sky. And he and Ethan are earthly wanderers, carpenters, not yielding to the maiden and love life. If one gets tired, the other will not let fall, will support, and they will go on until their last sunset. And when she opened the door to him, he said, "Stretch out your hand," and placed a small black stone in her palm. "What is it?" she asked in surprise. "It's my father's," he explained. "All I have left of my father is an old guitar. A year later, I accidentally dropped it. It cracked, and inside was duct taped this note to me. And this pebble here. A meteorite. My father wasn't always an alcoholic. He wanted me to know. He used to believe and dream, and hold stars in the palm of his hand. This is the most precious thing I have. I give it to you because you are my star." And Adriana nestled silently against his chest.